So good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 15th meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. We met at 5:45 to go into executive session, and at the time I asked John whether the meeting was properly warned, and he said...
Yes, it was, Daniel.
And it was true. And so we didn't take any action, and now here we are in the regular session. Our first order of business is to approve minutes from October 1st, 2024. Can I get a motion? Richard.
Move we approve the minutes.
Okay, Richard's made a motion to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2024. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. Chair's remarks. Just a reminder about kind of rules of engagement with this meeting. This applies to people in the room and on Zoom. Raise your hand. I'll say, hey, you. If I know your name, I'll try to use your name. If I don't, I'll try to be polite and, invite you to participate in the meeting. And then state your name, state where you're from. You can have up to 3 minutes to speak on the matter. Try to keep it on topic about what we're actually discussing at that particular time in the agenda. I would urge civility. And I think, one of the ways that we could see that is really listening to each other. And that means that we don't talk over each other. We wait our turn, we wait to be recognized. And that goes for all of us. And I think that's about it in terms of how to access the meeting. If as we go forward, people are confused about how to access the meeting or people forget certain things, I'll just jump in and remind folks. One other thing I wanted to kind of mention that I saw that was happening in town this afternoon, just before I came here, I was down on the Whetstone Pathway, and there was a sort of impromptu kind of brass band. I don't know if that's probably the best way to describe it. It was really great. There was a lot of tubas and that kind of thing. And people handing out clothing and other kind of basic needs. It was a nice kind of positive environment that felt to me very Brattleboro. And so I was glad to see it, and thank you for the folks who were putting it on. And that concludes my remarks, and I'll pass it on to John for manager's comments.
Thanks, Daniel. I wanted to let everyone know there's going to be a Public Works open house on Saturday, October 19th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Public Works Barn at 211 Fairgrounds Road. This is a great opportunity to meet the team, get a look at the equipment, watch some live demonstrations. There's going to be some activities for kids and refreshments, so take a trip down to Public Works this Saturday from 10 to 1 and check it out. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, there is a syringe cleanup day, and people can meet to help out with cleanup at 29 Flat Street at noon, and that event will be going from noon to 2 p.m. to try to learn about how to clean up syringes and to clean up a bunch of them that may be down in that area. We'll hear from the Human Services Review Committee later tonight, but first a reminder that applications are due next Wednesday on October 23rd by 5 p.m. All applications should be emailed to Jessica Stickler at jstickler, STICKLOR, at brattleboro.gov, or brought or mailed to the town manager's office at 230 Main Street, Suite 208. The Gibson-Aiken Center opens for after-school and evening programs on Monday, October 21st. A complete listing of the program offerings there can be found on the town website at brattleboro.gov under the Recreation and Parks page. Also, the Nelson Withington skating facility is open for the season on Saturday, October 26th. The public skating schedule can be found on the town website, also on the Rec and Parks page. Season passes can be purchased at the Rec and Parks office at 207 Main Street. A 10% discount will be given if those are purchased by October 24th. And finally, for everyone interested in participating in the upcoming election, If you've not yet received your ballot in the mail, contact the town clerk's office so we can ensure you get a ballot. Once you have voted, you should return your ballot as soon as possible, and it must be received by the town clerk no later than 7 p.m. on November 5th in order to be counted. You can return your ballot using the secure drop box in the parking lot or by mail, although time's running out for that, or in person at the town clerk's office. As a reminder, the election will be held at the American Legion on November 5th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you plan to vote in person, we encourage you to bring the ballot that was mailed to you if possible. The town clerk's office will be closed on Election Day and also on the following day, and that's all I have.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Select board members with comments and/or committee reports. Peter?
I just wanted to acknowledge that the community suffered a profound loss with the passing of Annie Richards. For those knew her, knew she was a delightful human being, and nobody worked or championed the town of Brattleboro any more than she did, and the people that lived within this community know that. The kids, she worked so hard on behalf, and we're going to feel this loss for a little while, and my deepest condolence going out to the entire Richards family.
Thanks, Peter. Other board members, France.
Thank you, Daniel. I will be leaving town tomorrow, just for a few days, but it means that my normal office hours will not happen this week, but they will happen again next week, Wednesday from 4:30 to 6:30, Friday morning from 8 to 10.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. So next up is public participation. This is the part of the meeting where members of the public may speak on a matter that is not on tonight's agenda. They could also request that an item from the consent agenda be pulled for consideration. So if there's a member of the public that would like to speak, raise your hand and be recognized, and then you can have up to 3 minutes. So I see 3 people in the room, maybe 4 actually. I don't see anybody on Zoom, so I'm going to see if I can do it in order. So I'm going to say Mr. DeGray, Ms. Latronica, person back right. Oh, yeah, hello. And Ms. O'Connor next. So, Dick, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. I would ask you to take under consideration moving the November 5th meeting, given the fact that it's a big election day, and that's going to be a big meeting. I think it's the first showing of the budget, and I'd like to have the town's full attention when you do that, so possibly moving it to Wednesday or Monday, whatever. But I think that would be a great benefit to the community as a whole and not impose a great hardship. Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback. Liz, myself, and John have kind of been talking a little bit about that. I don't think, well, we'll come back to it. Agenda setting is considering it, but it's not something that we're blind to. And Ms. Latronica?
Hi, Star Latronica, Library Director, next door. I just want to remind everybody that this coming weekend, is the Brattleboro Literary Festival, which is an amazing event with over 40 authors, fiction, nonfiction, and really, really remarkable opportunity to get to know authors up close, hear about their work, hear about their process, and it's all free. So it's an amazing gift to the community. I hope everybody turns out. We have over 40 authors coming, and also, on Saturday, there is a day of action, which is when communities unite together to oppose book bans. So that's your opportunity to have your picture taken with a favorite banned book and post it on social media. So thanks a lot. See you there.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that?
Liz would like to speak to it very briefly.
Yes, I just want to say that I called up the Literary Festival's website today, looked at their schedule, picked out a number of things I was interested in attending, and everyone can do that.
Yeah. Sigrid Nunez, 118 Elliott Street in the afternoon should be good. Mr. Baxter.
I actually wanted to comment on one.
Would you mind coming to the microphone? Some people who are on Zoom and watching on TV.
I actually wanted to speak to one of the new business permits. Should I hold?
Yes, you should. Yeah, thank you. Ms. O'Connor? Very well. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, we'll move on. So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. John, would you like to walk us through what we have on consent today?
Absolutely, Daniel. 9 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be approving the use of $12,698 from the Global Warming Solutions Fund to support the purchase of an electric vehicle for the police department. You'll be approving a first and second class liquor license for Hool's Wine located at 972 Putney Road. You'll be approving the renewal of a first and third class liquor license and an outside consumption permit for the Heart Rose Club located at 11 Green Street. You'll be accepting a $10,000 grant award for helping to fund the upcoming election from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. You'll be approving the renewal of the town health insurance plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield for calendar year 2025. You'll be ratifying acceptance of a $1.65 million grant from the U.S. Treasury Capital Projects Fund for libraries to conduct improvements on the library and for development of exterior space to expand use and improve accessibility. You will be awarding the FY25 fuel oil bid to low bidder Discount Oil of Keene at the per gallon price of $2.6375. And you will be ratifying 2 parade permits for events that have already occurred: the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired's White Cane Awareness Day parade that happened this morning, and the VBikes parade down Main Street at the last gallery walk on October 4th.
Great. Thank you, John. Select Board, anyone wish to pull one of those items for consideration at the end of the agenda? No? Then I'd entertain a motion.
I'll motion.
Yep.
A motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Peter's made a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. We're going to move on to new business. The first item of new business today is the Human Services Review Committee update. David, if you and your team would like to come to the presenters table here, if you need any more chairs, we could either give you a trash can or rustle up a chair from somewhere.
Bring one up.
It's a team effort, so let's have as many folks from the team as want to be part of it. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. The Human Services Review Committee is a committee of RTM. Important to name that. And they were invited here to talk about their process and to answer any questions that the Select Board or members of the public may have. And David is the chair of the committee, David Miner. I don't know if you'd like to introduce the rest of the committee or if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Jim?
Jim Hildebrand, live out on Green Meadow.
Okay.
And a fairly new member of the Brattleboro community. Couple years. I've been here a couple years.
Great. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Tara O'Brien, she, her pronouns. I'm a Brattleboro resident and also an RTM member.
Sarah Turbo, she, her as well.
Great. So David, we've got some backup material with applications and some of the guidance for the application. And so we're ready to hear your presentation and we'll have some questions.
So one thing I really wanted to do was to try to give some background about the Human Services Committee, what we've done over the years, and how we've gotten to where we are today. The information that was provided was our application guidance and instructions, and also process and procedures. And that's all the information, for instance, that's also given to the applicants and gets into the meat of what we do and our processes. The Human Services grant allocations in the town budget are a long-standing tradition in Brattleboro, designed to meet crucial community needs. These include food and financial insecurity, homelessness and housing stability, disability support, substance abuse prevention, harm reduction, elder, child, and adolescent health and well-being, BIPOC, LGBTQ, refugee and immigrant support and safety, and other services that address the pressing needs of Brattleboro residents. The objective of the representative town meeting with the formation of the Human Services Review Committee was to allow a committee to more thoroughly review the grant applications and make recommendations to RTM in March for approval, thereby taking the review of individual requests away from the RTM body as a part of the annual RTM meeting. This not only allowed for the streamlining of the process, but also provided for a more thorough review of grant requests. As an example, last year we had 39 applications with over 900 pages of information to read. These applications and the processes were discussed during over 30 hours of committee meetings from September through December, and this does not include individual time required to read each application. With rare exception, the RTM has accepted the recommendations of the committee without debate. The members of the Human Services Review Committee are appointed by the representative town meeting. RTM formally established the Human Services Committee in March of 2019, with members of the committee appointed by the town moderator and thereafter elected by town meeting with the authority of the town moderator to fill vacancies throughout the year. At this point in time, I certainly would invite anybody who has any interest in joining the Human Services Committee. We're more than welcome to have you on board. So, the applications, as John outlined, are due next week, and from that point, we will hit the ground running. But it is an open committee, and I think that if you are interested, please voice your interest, and happy to talk with anybody who may have that interest. A little background on funding history. 10 years ago, we allocated $120,000 to 21 organizations. 5 years ago, we allocated $198,020 to 26 organizations. For federal fiscal year 2022, that was when RTM implemented a 1.4% grant limit. That was the first time that the committee had a limit, and really actually was kind of a welcome change. That first year, we provided 33 grants totaling $261,900. That, in fact, did not meet the 1.4% allocation. 2 years later, still with a 1.4% allocation, we granted 36 grants applications totaling $280,891. Of interest there, we had total application requests of $388,000. So the committee had to weigh very carefully the applications and how we were going to apply it. This past year, for the first time, we had 2% allocation. Again, we did not receive applications that met the amount that was granted. We did grant 38 applications for $367,810. It is the responsibility of the committee to utilize the money, the grant of 2%, up to the amount that is provided. And so we rely on the applications, and we will provide grants based upon the application request. We do not, though, each applicant, and I'll get into, what we look at, but each application is reviewed and not necessarily simply accepted because we do have the money available. Last year, the funding cycle was in fact $440,774, and we did approve $367,810. The allocation for last year, 53% of the money that we gave went to drug, mental health, and housing. 27% went to child and elder care. 9% went to food, and 11% went to other. Now, this is certainly looking at a kind of a high level, and in many cases, an applicant covers almost each one of those areas. But it kind of gives a general sense as to what our focus was. For this year's funding, the amount of available funds is $461,276. Regarding the applications, any nonprofit organization with or without official nonprofit status that provides human services for the residents of Brattleboro on a non-discriminatory basis may apply to receive funding from the town. Organizations may apply every year. Organizations may ask for support for general operating expenses and or for a specific purpose or project. Funding for approved requests will be dispersed in a lump sum after July 1st. If an organization operates countrywide, regionally, or statewide, they must give specifics about their operations that serve Brattleboro residents. The money that is allocated is Brattleboro tax money, resident tax money, and we focus on making sure that a group is in fact providing services to Brattleboro residents. That is extremely important. The committee reserves the right to deny funding for a request if the application is late, incomplete, or unresponsive to the questions, or if it does not meet the basic criteria. Applications will be read and scored by each member of the committee, with the exception of those who have recused themselves from evaluating specific organizations because of conflicts of interest. The scoring rubric includes the following considerations, each to be rated 0 to 5 with a total score of 0 to 15. Applications that receive a score of 7 or less will not be funded. Applications with a score of 8 or higher will be partially or fully funded. And the rubric scoring is based on, to what degree does the organization have strong fiscal management and oversight? Also, to what degree does the organization or program effectively impact the population it seeks to serve? As applicable, to what degree does the organization or program effectively monitor and respond to the changing needs and within the organizational ecosystem in Brattleboro? And finally, to what degree is this program or organization of service to the people or town of Brattleboro? To what degree does this organization or program provide services specifically to the residents of Brattleboro? We are responsible to the voters of Brattleboro for ensuring that our money is spent wisely and for the benefit of our residents. If you operate countywide, countywide, regionally, or statewide, as I said, you must give specifics about your operations that serve Brattleboro residents. If you do not provide this level of detail, the committee will consider your application unresponsive and will not recommend funding for you. I repeat that because that is an important consideration. This year, we have 8 people who have been appointed to the committee. We'll begin to review the applications the week following their next week following their submission, or actually, we'll begin to review the applications the week after we receive the applications. So that process will begin at the end of the month. It's important that the deadline for application submission be met. Applications that are submitted late will not be accepted. As I went through, there's a lot of work that has to get done. And so it's difficult for us to work with moving pieces. And so we ask that you submit your application timely. Deadline, as John outlined, is Wednesday, October 23rd at 5 p.m. Applicant organizations will be informed by the committee's recommendations by email. Applicants may request to meet with the committee to discuss the committee's recommendation. And based upon this meeting, the committee may make an adjustment to its recommendation after holding a deliberative session. All final recommendations are also made available to the town report. Copies of the report are available at the Municipal Center prior to the town meeting or on the town website.
Great. Thank you, David. So, Select Board, there's no motion for this. It's an information item, really. It's an opportunity to ask questions. And so let's start with the board. First of all, questions about the presentation or about this committee's process? Liz?
Well, I want to just thank you all for your work. It's really a benefit to the town as a whole. But I just had a question. Do you have to be an RTM member to be a member of your committee?
You do not, no.
Thank you.
You do need to be a member of the resident of the town, but you don't need to be a member of our team.
Thank you.
Interesting. Other questions?
Other questions in general, other questions on specifically the
Other
presentation?
questions about this presentation or about this committee's charge? No?
I'm
You
not
don't have to come up with one.
understanding-
I have several. So.
Okay,
You know.
I'm not understanding the limitations you're placing, but I'll let you go.
Well, so this is a update from the Human Services Review Committee. So I think questions about the Human Services Review Committee would be germane. Yeah.
No, I'll let you go ahead, Dave.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for coming and thanks for the work. I attended one of your, I think it was the first meeting, and you guys were already putting a lot of work, a lot of thoughtful work into how the application looks, what questions it's asking, what your process is. This is a lot of work that's asked of this committee, and nowadays you have nearly $500,000 to work with, which is a chunk. And so that's a big responsibility on your shoulders. And so some of the things that I'm curious about are like your own thoughts on like your goal. Like, do you guys discuss what the goal is for this committee? And thoughts on how to make the most impact with this nearly $500,000. I'd be curious.
Anybody want to take this? I can talk. No? So as far as, I think we outlined what our goals are. I think that we rely on the organizations who are applying for the money to identify the populations that they're looking to work with and to identify the need. For instance, if you take a look at the food banks, there are food banks that will focus on the total population. There are food banks that will focus on different population groups, within the community. And so, we are looking for groups and organizations that have identified a need in the town and how they provide that service. And so, it's somewhat on one hand reactionary, but on the other hand, I think that the needs of the town are being served and being served by a number of different organizations, and I think that it's overall. Individually, I think it's interesting. We have 8 members, and the members of the committee all have, I think, a different interest and a different focus. And so I think that as we review the applications, I think we get not only the opinions and focus of what the grant is, but then we also get the opinions and focus of the people on the committee, which is important. So it's the decision, in fact, through the rubric is something that we make together. And I think that's important.
Thoughts on how to be most impactful with these dollars?
The idea, I think, is to identify need, and I think I think the organizations themselves are identifying the need. We are hitting a cross section of the community, and I think it's important that we don't simply define as a committee the one area that we think we need to serve, because that, I think, is operating with blinders on, and so I think it's important that we have an open mind to what we're seeing and what's being proposed, and that we react accordingly.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if other committee members want to respond. If not, we'll see if there are any more questions. Yep. Let me just
comment that I just really appreciate the level of accountability that you're requiring from the applicants that you deal with, and it's a great model for really responsible use of taxpayers' money, and I really appreciate that.
Okay, Franz?
Thank you, Daniel. It's, I think, maybe somewhat buried in Daniel's question was something I've heard discussed just loosely, not in any organized setting or fashion, but that by having so many different recipients, that maybe the actual effectiveness of the contributions is somewhat diluted. Do you have thoughts about that? I mean, have you guys had any discussion of, well, gee, maybe we should narrow it down and give bigger amounts to fewer organizations? Or I'm just wondering if you've had thoughts about that.
Well, I think as I pointed out, I think that there are. I think if you take a look at the groups that are applying for money, they're making impacts to a variety of different sectors of our population. I think if we limit, if we as a committee try to define something that we want to focus on, I think then what you're doing is you're getting us to make a decision and try to define what the needs of the community should be. And I can probably tell you that myself, I probably couldn't guess all the needs of the community, and that's the value of having, I think what we did. If you take a look at what we gave, 10 years ago, $120,000. Yeah, that was a mere pittance. But it was an idea of kind of spreading it out. When you get up to the amount that we are now, I think that we can make meaningful contributions to a number of different organizations. The intent has not been over time to provide 100% of a budget to any one organization, and that there are generally every organization, that's part of the application. What other funding sources do you have? And that's part of what we see as well, and we know that there are a number of funding sources, and it's interesting to see what these organizations have found available, and they're not all going down the same rabbit hole trying to find money. And they are spread out and coming up with a number of different solutions, which is encouraging.
May I add a few things, David?
Sure.
A few things on that point. I think one is that we are interested, and we asked a question in the application about the degree to which the organizations are collaborating with one another, knowing that this is an ecosystem in the town and that they have to collaborate with one another in order to make an impact on the town. So that is a question that we consider when we're thinking about the impact overall. So that's one thing I want to point out. The second thing is, I think David made a really great point that if the committee were to choose the areas that we thought we needed most focus, that would be a policy-making decision on our part. And we don't see that necessarily as our job. We see that as y'all's job or RTM's job for that matter. What are the priorities that most need to be funded? And I think part of the reason that we've had no trouble with RTM approving the amount is because we've been nonpartisan, so to speak. We are responding to the organizations that come to us saying, this is the money that we need in order to serve the community in the ways in which we want to serve it. My personal opinion, and my personal opinion is that there are a lot of these organizations that should be getting more money from the town of Brattleboro. I think a lot of them can have a much bigger impact with a larger budget. I think organizations that deal with homelessness and housing, I think that organizations that deal with substance use and mental health issues are obviously the big issues in this town. How do we deal with those problems? And I would, I think if we were to say, yes, we're going to spend $400,000 of the $480,000 that we have on one or two organizations, it would leave the other 36 organizations out in the cold. I think if there's a question, this to me is the bare minimum that I think the town should be giving to these organizations. And I think if there's a concern about impact and wanting to make sure that these organizations can really do their part in confronting the challenges that are confronting the town as a whole, that I think that becomes a question for budgeting season more so than it does become a question for the human services budget.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we want to hear from the public as well before we wrap this up. Before we do that, the final question that I have for you all and for the board as well is we will write the warning for RTM. So several years back, we put a question on what would be an appropriate percentage of the budget to use for human services funding. And that was helpful. We can have that question on here again. We could also choose not to put that question on and just kind of go with what we've been doing this last year. I wonder if there are other questions that you would like the select board to be asking RTM to help your process, or if there are board members with thoughts on other questions that would be helpful to hear RTM's opinion on.
I know. For example, we added a article to vote on the limitation of the committee size, and we did that, I think, towards the end. I think we'll have a better sense as to what our needs might be based upon once we see all the applications. Mm-hmm. And I think the line of communication we have has been great, and certainly we will get together with you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if things are coming up that you're wrestling with and feeling like you have a process that has been established by RTM, but you would like to kind of question some of that, or find out what RTM thinks about some of that, let us know. We can put it on the warning. Well, we can talk about it first and then maybe put it on the warning.
Okay, good.
Other board members with final questions before we go to the public? Okay. Members of the public with questions for the Human Services Review Committee. Mr. DeGray.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee. Those long in tooth would remember, and I certainly remember, when this fell under the purview of the select board. And a gentleman who served with distinction, Jorg Meyer, again, those long in tooth, and remember him serving on the board, did some research and found that this didn't belong with the select board and it needed to be a committee. I think it's covered in state statute. So I do appreciate that leaving the board, and I'm sure you would appreciate it, leaving the board and having it fall on a committee who does a wonderful job. I do have a concern as not talking about the need, but the tax impact as more money is given by RTM. The residual effect is that it's having an impact on the taxpayers. And that's a huge concern of me, because one of the things I've always said is that people who are receiving some of the monies through the organizations, however it may be, they're paying taxes. And as more money is distributed, there's an impact on their taxes or on their rent, because everybody in the community is paying taxes. Just because you're a renter, your taxes, your rent goes up, commensurate with what the tax rate is going to be and what the water rate is going to be. So I'm hopeful that RTM is considerate of that, not dismissing what you were talking about, the need and the community, and this being the minimum of what we should be giving out. I don't dispute any of that, but there's a flip side to the impact as that number exponentially grows. And so I would hope that everybody is considerate of that. And, you know, if certainly I think you're doing an excellent job. I don't think that there's a whole lot of duplication of services. You know, they might intertwine a little bit, but I think you have done a good job. And I also believe that you haven't given out all the money. And so just because you have the money to give out, you showed good discretion and not just saying, we've got this pot of money, let's make sure we give it all out. So I thank you for your service. But I, again, be mindful of that larger number. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick.
I would just say that I think that I appreciate that a lot. And as you said, exactly, we are very thoughtful about not spending money that we don't need to spend, right? That's very important to us on the committee. I would also say that I think that the organizations that we fund contribute significantly to the financial health and well-being of the community. So there might be actually some dividends that are paid back in terms of the environment downtown, for example, if these organizations are doing a good job of dealing with the downtown business area, does that help the town and our finances as a town as well? So it's a little push and pull, I would say.
Thanks, Sarah. Other questions for the Human Services Review Committee? Okay, final thoughts from the board? Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming, appreciate your work, and stay in touch. Thank you. And so the next item on our agenda is a potential first and third class liquor license, outside consumption permit, and annual entertainment license for Marigold, which will be located at 157 Main Street in the former River Garden Marketplace. And we have a memo here from our town manager and town clerk speaking to the application with a recommendation to approve said licenses. And I believe we have the applicant, Glenn Alper.
Where would you like me?
Please come to the table. So Glenn Alper is here. He's the applicant. And John, do you want to do any more table setting on that?
No, that's pretty much it. You have the application in your backup materials board, and Mr. Alper could maybe explain the background on this permit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome. Go ahead. Hi. My name is Glenn Alper, by the way.
Hi, Glenn.
My intention is to have a bit of a community center for locals. I know that there's a lot of people that come to visit the town. I guess my main business plan and focus is on supporting local artists, local musicians to perform in the space. Continue, I know there's a cafe before, have a cafe in there, a beer garden, just kind of a family-friendly at the same time, live music often during the day, on the weekends, and sometimes in the evenings. Yeah, I don't know what else.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Glenn. Let's start with a motion, and then we can have discussion around that. Would anyone like to offer it?
I'm not ready yet to make a motion.
Elizabeth is not ready to make a motion. Fine. Anyone else interested? No interest. Interesting. Okay. Liz?
Hey, Glenn, thank you for coming. Thank you for offering to open a business in our town. I think it's great. My concern is the 1 a.m. ending time. It's quite a departure from the rest of the bars and restaurants downtown. And I've heard from several neighbors that they're quite concerned about that because it is not only businesses, but residences who are your neighbors. And I wondered how you have considered that and whether you've considered having a earlier end time.
Well, when I wrote 1 a.m., I didn't necessarily see it that we were going to be having these events, pushing it right to the last minute, as much as it's often there's lingerers that kind of hang out. The band or the artists often take a little while to get out of there. So that was more like a firm cutoff time than it was an intention of having events go that late. In talking to Hillary, it seemed like one option might be to have a certain cutoff point where we say, okay, we're not going to get, I'm not planning on it being loud in the first place, but to keep the volume moderate after a certain point, to make sure that the doors to the back deck remain closed after a certain point, just so that we're not, causing a nuisance or, anything like that. I also know that it seems like in the past, I don't have great familiarity with the previous owners and their situation with the public, but I do know that for me, I feel like I'm good at communicating with and being able to address concerns as they arise and less confrontational and more cooperative, I guess, would be the goal. So yeah, I'm not seeing particularly loud music in there, but at the same time, I do recognize that the needs of the community and the fact that no one wants to hear loud music late at night. So I do get that. So. Thank you.
I think, just to follow up, Daniel, that it would be better to start from a earlier end time rather than, be open to conflicts and negotiation and so forth. That I think if it were more consistent with the other bars and restaurants, I think many people in the community think that bars and restaurants close too early, but I think that this is an exaggeratedly long. Even I'm sure it's the only place that's open that late. So
I'm not as familiar with when other places are open. I would like to encourage nightlife in Brattleboro. From all the response I've gotten, it's like excitement at the fact that there's going to be things going on. I'm not intending it to be just a late night club as much as having that option for evening events to be able to extend a little bit. So, I don't know in terms of the time, I don't have a firm reason that it needs to be 1 a.m. I can be a little bit flexible on that, but I do know that the trajectory of nighttime events, if an event starts at 8 or 9 o'clock, and then, and things go till 11:30, 12 o'clock, and then, maybe the music is all over by 11:30 or 12, and then it's just a matter of getting people out of there. So I was just concerned about not wanting to break any rules by having people in the business after 12:30 and brushing people out and having that stressful environment at the end of a night when it's more about just kind of transitioning from event to not event and having a little bit of wiggle room on the other end of it. That was my intention.
Great. So, thank you.
Well, I would suggest that we hear from the public in due course and have the ability to discuss it among ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Before we do that, let's hear from the board. Richard?
I just have a question about the procedure or what the timing really means. So if we say 1 a.m., does that mean that he has to shut down at 1 a.m. or that music ends at 1 a.m., that the entertainment ends at 1 a.m.? Because from what I'm hearing from you is you don't really plan to have the music go on that long, say.
Exactly.
It's all the other things that happen after the show's over. So what does the license really cover? That's sort of my question.
Great question. Thank you, Richard. John, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, a little bit. So the question there is about the time, and I'm just trying to find what you put down in here, and I think it was
11 a.m. to 1
11 to
a.m.
1.
on page 50.
Yeah, so
on the left-hand side.
the event, an event would be covered and allowed for anywhere in that period, and so it would, would have to, you couldn't be performing anything further beyond that point, beyond the 1 a.m. So.
And I could be flexible. I don't need people performing at 1 a.m. That seems a little bit late to me as well. So I just wanted to leave a little bit of room just have it not be a stressful situation at the end of a performance. That was the main goal.
So that doesn't mean he has to shut down at 1 a.m. It just means the music has to stop.
Right.
So,
Well, the license actually, so the application says on page 50, on the left-hand side, sort of midway down, estimated time period for alcohol. And so that's describing the estimated time during which alcohol will be served. There's some other pieces to it, I believe, on page 54, it speaks to outside consumption end time. That bit isn't filled in. Maybe if that was information that you had to have in order to be able to make a decision, maybe we need to get that information from Hillary. So you tell me, is that crucial information to have right now?
to know when, I'm not sure what you're asking.
So the application speaks to a period between 11 a.m. and 1 a.m. For the serving of alcohol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the entertainments are separate, or is it all tied together?
They are.
All one license.
All one thing.
This is where I think I do wish that Hillary was here, because I am not.
It's one, we're giving both a liquor license and an entertainment license.
That's
and
right.
it says 1 a.m., so
But
it's
that-
1
Three
a.m.
things, actually.
1 a.m. for the whole shebang.
But, so the license encompasses both. It's not a separate liquor and
There's a
entertainment.
liquor license, there's an entertainment license, and there's an outside consumption permit.
So there's three.
There are three things.
Okay.
Well, there are actually two kinds of liquor licenses, but the liquor licenses.
But they're all to 1 a.m.
Right.
As-
But do
as
they all
written.
have to
we
meet at the
can-
same time?
If,
Or could
Let's
they
not
have
speak over
different
each other,
times?
please.
I'm sorry.
so we could change, we could have the entertainment say to be till 11 or 11:30, but the liquor part could be till 1?
That might be something that we need to talk with Hillary about.
We might have to come back with an answer on that. If that's going to affect your vote, then
Yeah.
we probably have
That's
to
what I'm
do some
wondering.
research on it.
Can I
Peter, go ahead.
inquire, how does, short of the outside consumption, because I know that the previous owner didn't have that, how does this differ from what they had?
I believe what it differs in is the hours. I believe I was on the board when we issued the license for the previous operation, but I don't have a perfect memory of it. Liz?
I am similarly rusty, but it certainly wasn't 1 a.m. It was probably more like 10 or 11. And it was contentious, and there was agreements to stop the entertainment on weeknights. There was a weeknight versus a weekend. Mm-hmm. So there was all sorts of permutations about when they would stop music and when they would close. And I know it's quite a departure from the last operation.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, the previous owners had till 11 p.m. That was my understanding from Hillary.
Does that help, Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah. May I just, for a moment, so I am in favor of having more activity in our downtown. I think active spaces where people can enjoy all of the various things that this community has to offer are great. I think that, you've spoken to already a willingness to sort of be flexible. And what you were trying to do here was have a license that would give you the room you needed to operate your business in a reasonable way. I think consideration of neighbors is completely appropriate. And, you're speaking to closing the deck doors at a certain time. Maybe you want to tell us what you're thinking for that particular time. I know that we have members of the public that wish to speak on this matter as well. But, right now, for this board member, there's nothing here that makes me think, I don't want to approve this license. I would like to give this business a chance to show us that it can be a positive part of our community. And we have the provisions to, take this license back. We have the ability to impose kind of limitations on the license. And so the previous operation, as I understood it, whilst there was, some contentiousness at the initial licensing, as far as I understood from asking, town administration, there were actually no complaints that were upheld about noise. So I would like to think that this business can also operate in that same way and be a good neighbor.
And I would just suggest that I'd be very supportive if it operated in the same congenial, neighborly manner till 11.
Okay. Other board members got some thoughts on this. We are still absent a motion, and I can make a motion if needs be. It's not customary for me to do so, but
It might be useful to hear from the public.
okay, great. So members of the public that wish to speak to this entertainment license, liquor licenses, and outside consumption permit. First of all, I'm going to recognize Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief, I forgot which one it is, Assistant Chief Evans from the Brattleboro Police Department.
Jeremy Evans, I'm the Assistant Police Chief. Just for some historical noise enforcement that we used to do back when we had a nightlife in town pre-COVID. We had several bars on Elliott Street that we used to work with on noise, mostly on the weekends. But the big things that we focused on weren't as much trying to get them to keep the noise down, but was the simple things like keeping the doors closed and the windows shut. And that usually solved all of our noise issues that we had. So we didn't see like major long-term problems with it. It was just the simple things like that were easy to adjust.
Right. And as part of the review process for this license, you guys, the police department's involved, the fire department's involved.
Yes, sir.
And the town clerk's office,
No, all town departments review it.
All town departments.
They've all approved.
Okay.
This moving forward.
And the recommendation is to approve it?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Members of the public, Mr. DeGray.
The outside consumption, I didn't hear you say a time.
Because it didn't have one on the application, so I didn't want
I was looking and I didn't see one,
one.
but I thought you might have had one up there.
Yeah.
And so I guess a good question to Mr. Marigold would.
Alper's last name.
Huh?
Alper is the last name.
Alper, okay. Excuse me. Would be what he would think a good time for shutting the outside consumption, because I believe he's most likely talking about that back deck.
Yes.
Which is in a neighborhood. You have neighbors abutting your property, and I'm sure that's a huge concern. And I can remember the outside consumption spot in the Harmony parking lot where there was apartments up above, and it became quite boisterous and problems the later it got in the evening. So that would be a concern I would have, and would like to hear what you have to say about what you think would be a good time to close those doors or shut that outside consumption.
Yeah, thank you. And Glenn, our practice here is that the people speak to the board and then we kind of bounce it back to you.
Okay.
And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we say thank you. So I don't know if you want to speak real briefly to your thoughts on outside consumption, like time. It isn't in the application, and so procedurally I'm kind of curious about, you could say something, but it's not part of the...
I think it would be for the hours that it was open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like there's two. I'll try and be brief. There's the doors being open, which is like just noise coming from the space and annoying people and neighbors. And then there's the outside consumption. I am happy to limit the time if we say outside consumption needs to end at 11. I shouldn't go back to the time of how long, right? We're sticking with the outside consumption in this response right now. Is that right?
Sure.
I think it's completely reasonable to say that outside consumption we need to stop at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
the doors are truthfully going to be closed more often than not, just because of the weather, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't know what to say. I do want to be flexible with that. I want happy neighbors. I want good relations. So, you know, I currently have a club in East Hampton, Massachusetts, and we've never once had a complaint or a noise issue in the last 3 years of being open. So I feel that, you know, I tend to be more on the side of keeping things conservative more than getting wild and boisterous anyway. It's not a huge space. My view is if it's loud enough that you can't hear each other talk, that it's too loud. So I think my intention is not to have a loud space, whether it's inside or outside. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Glenn. So let's hear from members of the public and then bring it back to the board. Mr. Baxter.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
My name is Mark Baxter. I'm a neighbor. I live at 167 Main Street, which is the Paramount building. Next door to River Garden. I live on the top floor in the back. I can tell you that a permit to operate until 1 a.m., 7 days a week, as this permit states, is just an incompatible use of the space in the populated historic center of the town. And you have apartments and rentals abutting either side. The Paramount and the Hooker Dunham buildings form a horseshoe at the back of this property. Anything coming off of that back deck or those rear doors is amplified significantly up and beyond across all of the buildings abutting the rear of the property. Here you have a dozen or more apartments and rentals. You have the Brooks house across the street with a dozen upscale apartments, or 2 dozen. And I can tell you, I remember the controversy when River Garden first opened. There was quite a controversy about the hours and the noise. They ultimately agreed to extend evening hours only till 10 p.m. and then only on 2 nights a week. I'm asking the board to consider the same in this permit and when you look at it. Because this isn't just any casual restaurant or bar. This is stated in the permits as an entertainment venue. And one seeks to open and stay open until 1 a.m., 7 days a week. Mr. Alper owns a similar bar in Massachusetts. I wanted to just quote briefly from a newspaper profile of that bar that ran in the local paper. The bar was so loud that when I asked for the owner, the bartender can't hear me. The sound guy can't hear me. We have to shout into each other's ears to be heard. When the owner emerged from the crowd and joined me, we have to shout into each other's ears to converse. The permits filed here say that the music will be indoors. That is misleading. These back doors to the deck are propped open, at least with River Garden, routinely, with people coming and going from inside to outside, all hours, with amplified music flooding the entire rear of the property. I'm asking you to consider the building owners, the retail owners, the residents that abut this property in the heart of town and deny the application for extended hours.
That's 3 minutes, Mr. Baxter, if you could just wrap it up.
All right, thank you. I just request that you deny extended operating hours and work from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public that wish to speak on this item? Bonnie? Ms. Gervin? You could kind of angle it down if you want. It doesn't amplify.
It doesn't matter. I'll talk loud. My name is Bonnie Gervin. I don't live near the venue, but I go there a lot when it was a Whetstone venue. And they had a couple, they would have open mic. Open mic, they shut down at 9:30, so it wasn't bothering the neighbors. And it wasn't the same kind of volume. I read the article in the paper, And it sounded like a great spot for a college town. I'm not sure if you really looked into the demographics of Brattleboro. We are old, and we're not going to be staying up till 1 o'clock, participating in a circus. Maybe, once or twice a year. But it's not who we are, and it's a community. Where you're sticking this noisy spot is a community. There are many, many residents, and they're older, and they're working people, and they don't need to be up late at night. So I would really like to reconsider the time frame of that application.
Thanks, Bonnie. Other members of the public with comments or questions on this item? Nobody on Zoom? Yes, ma'am? If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
I'm Becky Day, and I do live downtown, right next to the place, and I'm very familiar with the Whetstone. And the owner of the Whetstone did accommodate the concerns, and I would be very happy to see this license approved with conditions, and the conditions being hours of operation and days of the week of operation, not from 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. I think we'd all be happy with 5 to 10, or even 12 to 10, but with doors shut, limited hours of operation, and 2 days a week closed. Thank you.
Am I about to make a comment?
If you could wait a second,
Sure.
I'll see if there are any more comments, and then I'll give you an opportunity.
Sure.
Any other comments from members of the public, either on Zoom or in the room? And so maybe, Mr. Alpert, if you want to just speak to your thoughts about the feedback that you're hearing, direct it to the board.
Please. I think we should be careful not to take what's been the experience and then project it onto what will be the experience, although I understand everyone has had an experience. In terms of comparing it to the East Hampton, if I use the wording, I don't know what the wording was on the application. I do not see this as an entertainment venue. I really do see this as a cafe, as a beer garden with live entertainment as supplemental. We're not generally charging admission. It's not a concert hall. It's really more of a gathering place with a reason to come out. My concern with closing too early or even opening, to open at 5 o'clock in the evening, it just takes away lunch. I don't need to be open till 1 in the morning, 7 days a week. So I'm flexible on that. I don't need to be open 7 days a week. I have a kid, I want to go home. So, I do think that when you start saying 10 o'clock, I understand the need to keep the noise down, but I also understand if we want a nightlife in this town, nightlife happens after 10 o'clock at night. So I could see maybe 12 o'clock to the, noise where the music stops at 12 o'clock on the weekends, 11 o'clock during the week, something like that. I'm trying to find a way to be flexible and not kind of kill the business plan and have an unsuccessful business because I don't have enough hours to be able to recoup the costs of just running the place. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Select Board, are you ready to make a decision on this? Okay. How about a motion?
Well, I can make a motion, but then I'd like to speak to it.
You can make the motion, and then you'll have the privilege to speak to it.
All right. Here we go. All right, so I will make the motion to approve the first and third class liquor license, annual entertainment license, and outside consumption permit for Marigold located at 157 Main Street.
Okay.
So I guess what I want to say is I don't want to get into a point where we're telling a man when to open and close. We're telling anybody when they can open and close. If we're permitting a business in our downtown, I see that as an asset. If it's bringing people into our downtown, I see it as an asset. I also understand that people also live downtown, so I want to be concerned to that. So and no offense, but like telling me can only open for 5 hours a day to me is a non-starter. So, I'm ready to make a decision on this, but I do want to take the consideration of the people who spoke into view, and I don't know how we do that. Can we amend this thing?
Well, so you've made that motion, so we can debate that motion right now. We could vote on that motion. If somebody wants to offer an amended motion, they can, and we could vote on that and then come back to the main motion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing Franz had his hand first and then Liz.
Thank you, Daniel.
And we have a motion on the floor.
I find myself somewhat confused about what the limitations could be in terms of what we approve. Do licenses typically specify different hours, different days of the week, different hours for different purposes within the premises? It could get pretty complicated in terms of what's a good enough set of hours for the business and what's a good enough set of hours for the neighbors. That's the negotiation, I guess I would say. Mm-hmm. And to just approve this without, just with the limitations of whatever it says, 11 a.m. to 1 a.m., seems a little bit blunt in terms of some of the other considerations that have been expressed. What would be nice would maybe to have some setting in which there could be an actual discussion between the interested parties and see how much overlap there might be. I mean, I've heard a little movement on both ends just from this discussion here. I haven't heard something that is getting us to, oh, that's fine with me and that's fine with me too on the other side. But are we going to try to tailor this application or this approval to specific parameters? I mean, are we prepared to start talking about, well, it should be 11 p.m. on weekdays, closed on Sunday? I mean, there's a number of possible variations that, and I'm not sure how far we should go in trying to settle all that.
Right. And so the motion as it stands right now would approve a license that allows for operation between 11 and 1, 7 days a week.
Right.
Yeah. Liz?
So taking into consideration what we've heard and also gestures of cooperation from Mr. Albert, I would suggest we modify the motion to include conditions of closure at 11 p.m. on weeknights and Saturday night remain open till midnight.
Okay. So you'd like to make an amendment to the motion to approve first and third cask liquor license, an annual entertainment license, and an outside consumption permit for Marigold located at 157 Main Street, but you would like to amend it to say that on weekdays it would close at 11 or it would be unable to do any of these, serving liquor or having entertainment after 11 p.m. And on weekends?
Saturday night.
So what are you saying about Sunday? That it's closed?
It would be 11.
So on Saturday and Sunday, on Saturday you're saying what?
Open till midnight.
Open until midnight, and then
Sunday
close
11.
at
Sunday
11 every other day.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Can we say Friday, 12 o'clock too, and then we're pretty much there?
Mr. Alpa, what I'd say right now is now the board does need to make a decision about this. And so, thank you. So Liz has made an amendment to this motion.
I would amend my amendment
Okay.
to have Friday and Saturday till midnight and the rest of the week 11.
Okay. Okay. So Liz has made that motion. We don't second motions here, so we can go ahead and vote on Liz's amended motion first.
Discuss it.
Do you have
and then vote on
a point of order, or can
No,
I finish
I'd
my...
like to discuss the amendment.
Okay. So we can discuss this amendment, we can take a vote on it, and then we can see where we're at.
Yeah.
So you have some discussion?
Yes, and what I'm wondering is whether this would apply to the business closes at 11 on weekdays and closes at midnight on Friday and Saturday, or it would stop the noisy entertainment.
What I'm proposing is the hours of operation, which are on the permit, which govern both types of liquor license and the entertainment adhere to the hours that we just discussed. Midnight on Friday and Saturday, 11 on the remaining evenings of the week.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on that amended motion?
Which is,
Richard?
Yeah, just a question. So, as you mentioned earlier, that we can always review the application based on what happens, and if Mr. Alper comes back and says, well, there's this big demand for people to stay, all of a sudden we found that there's this whole group of people in Brattleboro that want to stay up later, and that we could have even a more robust business. We could actually go in that direction or the other direction, changing it at any time.
Sure.
Well,
Okay.
let's just wait and see if that happens.
Right, but I'm just saying that
say-
it cuts both ways, and I
Yes.
just wanted to say that.
I think
Okay,
both
Peter?
of those people won't. So
We're on the amended motion right now.
yeah, at some point in time, should we ask Mr. Alper if that fits his business plan?
Well,
Is asking me now?
Let's ask him right now. How about that, Mr. Alper?
I think that would be fine. My only confusion is the liquor license and the entertainment license. So there's no entertainment and no liquor after those hours. In terms of getting everybody out the door, are we worried about that? Because that's I'm not saying a noisy thing. Often if there's the entertainer, they have to pack up their things and go. So that would be my only concern. But in terms of, it will work within my business plan, what you have proposed.
The town manager has the thought on that.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that if you're basically stopping the entertainment, I think then you're winding down, you're clearing the space.
You don't.
Well,
you don't
I
have to
agree,
go
but
home,
Let's be
you can't
recognized
stay
here.
here.
So, Liz?
I would just say, if a place of business closes, it's closed, and I'm sure people will leave, but we have to set a time for it to close.
Okay. Peter?
So if this works for Mr. Alper, then it works for me. So I'm ready to make a vote.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board on the amended motion?
Still confused.
On the amendment,
Mr. Alper, you're still confused?
I'm just confused. I guess I would only ask that if we're stopping the serving of alcohol, stopping of entertainment, that maybe there's a half-hour buffer in order to get everybody out the door. That's
Yeah,
something.
and thank
But
you.
anyways,
So wait a second. So we don't seem like we have that answer for you right
Okay.
now. John, is it reasonable that Hillary?
You could make that part of your motion if you want to add a half an hour after midnight on Friday and Saturday, and after 11 on the rest of the days.
But nobody on the deck,
wind
nobody,
down.
the outdoor permits shut down. I'm not trying to continue the party as much as I am trying to efficiently get everybody out of there. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm just speaking from somebody who owned and ran bars for most of my youth. I mean, typically, if the bar had to close at 1 a.m, like last call started at 12:30.
At 12:30, yeah.
So I'm.
Thanks, Peter. Other thoughts from the board on this amended motion?
just a point of order, the motion has not been amended as yet. The
No.
amendment has been proposed, but we haven't voted on whether to amend the motion.
Fine.
Right, then we're getting caught up in the minutiae.
Yeah.
I just think we should keep it simple, saying, closure at 11 and closure at midnight Friday and Saturday, closure at 11 every other night. And I'm sure Mr. Albert can figure out how to get people out of the building once the bars close.
Okay. Are we ready to make that motion? Well, we've made a motion. I'll restate it, and then we'll take a vote on it. So there was an amended motion to approve a first and third class liquor license, annual entertainment license, and outside consumption permit for Marigold located at 157 Main Street. The amendment being that it would be closed by 11 p.m. Well, let me do it the other way around. That it would be open until midnight on Friday and Saturday and closed by 11 p.m. every other day of the week. Are you ready for that vote?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4 in favor. All those opposed, nay. Passes 4-1. So we have
we've amended
the motion, and now we're going to actually vote on it. I hate all this parliamentary stuff. I don't know why I'm sitting here. So are we ready to take a vote on the amended motion? Okay. So the amended motion is to approve the first and third class liquor license, annual entertainment license, and outside consumption permit for Marigold located at 157 Main Street, wherein it would be closed at midnight on Friday and Saturday and closed by 11 on any other day of the week. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Passes, that's 4 in favor. All those opposed, nay. That passes 4-1. Mr. Alper, thank you for your time. You have your license, and please talk with us about your experience and talk with the community about how it's going.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. All right, moving on. Next up, we have the solid waste program options presentation.
Yep.
Big deal, big news.
Yep.
Lots of information to digest. John?
We've been working on solid waste services for the better part of this year. We've reviewed the existing curbside collection program for residential households, and we've considered how to procure services to continue with providing this service in town. We've engaged the public to identify what they value in solid waste services, and we've been engaged in negotiations with Casella, the one respondent to the town's request for qualifications. And we have 2 representatives from Casella with us tonight, Dave Allen and Todd Gamel, who've graciously agreed to talk with you about the services they have to offer. And so I would invite them to come up to the table.
Come on up to the presenters table, guys.
And before we hear from them, I'd just like to turn to Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland to give us a little bit of further background and context on it.
Great. Thanks, John. Yep. Patrick, you've just been cued for your lovely presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that was a great introduction. So one of the things that the administration learned in the process of engaging your community about their priorities for solid waste, we learned a couple of things. One is the town of Brattleboro has what the state of Vermont considers to be a Cadillac program in terms of solid waste collection. It's really unparalleled anywhere in the state of Vermont. There are 3 streams of waste incorporated. We have pay-as-you-throw for trash. We have unlimited recycling. And we have curbside organics collection. There's really no other comparable program anywhere in the state. And the reason we have that is because the people that make use of this program, that's what they want. And so what we heard loud and clear from the public was that we want to continue with this sort of Cadillac program for solid waste collection. As John outlined, we went through a procurement process. We examined the various different models and ways in which we could engage Casella, who is the only respondent to our procurement process. And this evening, we have a couple of options that we'd like to get some feedback from the board on. I think one thing I'd like to make clear right at the get-go for the board and for the public is that we're not seeking a decision to be made this evening. This is about giving us some feedback. John and I and the representatives from Casella have been working on this for months and months and months, and we'd like to try and hone in on exactly the range of services that the board would like to see. And so that's why we're here this evening. There are a couple of questions at the back of the memo, but in essence, what they say is we're going to present 2 options to you, and which of the 2 seems more attractive? There's some finer-tuned details, and we can get to that as we move forward. But what we're really after this evening is some feedback about the models that we've brought forward. So with the options available to us, one of the things that's important to make clear, and it was brought to our attention by Casella early on in the discussion is that any contract that the town has for future solid waste services for the curbside collection program needs to incorporate automated collection. I'm sure these gentlemen will want to speak to that a little bit, but I think I can tell you right off the bat that the reasons for this are pretty straightforward. It comes down to the safety of their employees and trying to provide a work environment that's competitive and desirable in today's employment environment. So with those sort of concerns involved, we recognize that any of the transitions that we make in our programming are going to need to involve automated collection. We've talked about that to a much greater degree at some of the previous meetings, but what I think is the basics is that you would have a vehicle that would proceed down the street with a mechanical arm that would pick up the trash can, dump it in the hopper, and move on down the street. So that's automated collection. Any transition to an automated collection style program is going to require the use of specialized carts. There's a couple examples over on the other side of the room there. You might think of them as small, medium, and large. There's a very large 96-gallon. There's a smaller 64-gallon. Then I believe the smallest one is a 48-gallon. Those are the type of carts that would be employed in a automated collection type of program. The cost for these carts is about $55 a piece, regardless of size, and that's delivered and provided. One of the things we'll be asking for a little later in the presentation is who should pay for these carts? And staff has some options and things we'd like the board to consider. We also recognize that based on the information that we have at this time, automated collection and the town's pay-as-you-throw bag system don't always play that well together. And so we have been exploring different ways in which the town could comply with the mandates of pay-as-you-throw, but doing so in a different way that didn't require the purchase of specialized bags. And we can talk about that when we get to that. In a nutshell, there are two different options being proposed for discussion this evening. Option A and option B. The difference between them is limited solely to what happens to trash, not recycling and not organics. In either case, option A and option B are the same with respect to organics and recycling. So the issue is trash. Under option A, there are two variations, but in essence what we would do is remove trash from the town's contract with Casella. Okay? There are, as I mentioned, two sort of sub-variants. The first one would be to make use of an existing negotiated rate and what's called a franchise fee. So under option A1, let's say, the issue of trash is dealt with in this manner. Casella would be granted a franchise right to serve the universe of customers within the town's curbside collection program. They would have that exclusive right. So as a household, you would have the choice of saying, we want to take advantage of that franchise price, or you would have the choice of perhaps hauling your own garbage to the solid waste district. Now, the franchise price that we've been able to negotiate with Casella is $26.60 a month. That comes down to about $320 a year, which is nearly identical to the price of what it would cost you to take and haul your own garbage to the solid waste district if you produced one bag of garbage per week. There's a sticker fee there. There's a per bag fee. In a nutshell, either option is $320 a year. The second option, still under option A, still where the town does not have as part of its contract paying for trash, you've got no franchise, and instead what you've got is the free market. Each and every household would be empowered to address their trash how they saw fit. The first household may choose to contract with Casella, and the second household may choose to contract with somebody else. Third household may choose to deliver their waste to the solid waste district, and so on. It would essentially be a free market system. There are some challenges, and I think it's important to make the board aware with either of these two models. The first one is under either of those models, if someone fails to pay their bill monthly, they run the risk of having their service shut off. If their service is shut off, and for example, we're utilizing the franchise, they've got to make good with Casella because that's their only option. It's that or take it to the solid waste district. What we foresee potentially is that there could be problem households that show up where for whatever reason they've been unable to keep current with their payments, and they get their services shut off, and the next thing you know, you've got garbage starting to pile up. That's a realistic possibility. The other interesting thing, particularly about a franchise contract, would be that the town would be responsible for enforcing this franchise. If Casella drives by and notices another company providing service to an address that is within the universe for which they hold the franchise, it would be incumbent upon the town to correct that situation. So one of the things we foresee in this particular option, option A, is the need for additional code enforcement capability. And so one of the things we've included in the budget for option A is a placeholder $70,000 annually to be able to hire an additional code enforcement officer. We'll take a look very quickly at the price comparison. This is on page 61 of your backup. And incidentally, there's some additional memos here. Some member of the public would like to take a look at those. In taking a look at the cost comparison between what we have today and option A, we see the following. First, I'd like to just describe that the table in the memo is broken up into sort of two sections: collection and disposal. It can be a little difficult to compare these numbers together because in certain instances, the contract with Triple T blended certain costs together, and working with Casella, they have provided more of an itemized bill. But what you can see in the bottom is that the net cost to Brattleboro is about $542,000 in fiscal 25. And with option A, that would increase to $967,491, which is a significant increase. But there's a couple of things to consider. The first is if we were to disassemble the bag program, that's a cost being borne by these households that they would no longer need to carry. And so that sort of brings these prices in some ways much closer together. It is also important to recognize, though, that in this option, option A, whether it's the franchise or the free market, that cost for trash collection and disposal still exists somewhere. It's being borne, once again, by the household. The nature, the universe of our curbside program, that's about 4,300 households. 4,300 households times $320, which is the annual cost of the franchise, is about $1.375 million. It would be a cost outside of the town's contract, but it would be a cost borne by these households. And it's a fairly expensive one. The other thing to think about is if we were to go along with the free market system, the cost will be significantly higher. It's $26.60 for the franchise at a negotiated price. But if Casella finds themselves in a situation where they've got to work one-on-one with every one of these 4,300 households, that price is going to be larger. Exactly how large, I couldn't say, but there's certainly an economy of scale that the town is able to buy into by virtue of bringing all 4,300 households together at one time, leading to this franchise price. So that's option A. Like I said, option A is a little complicated. It comes in a couple of different variations, but the town's contract would not cover trash and instead be limited to every other week recycling and weekly organics. Then you've got option B. Option B is much more typical, more standard. This is a program very similar to what we have today. It covers all three waste streams, including trash. And let me see. One of the things I suspect you're thinking is, okay, if we don't have a bag program, then how on earth are we going to be complying with pay-as-you-throw if we're making use of these carts? Let me step back for a minute and say, we heard a good deal of concern when engaging with the public about the size of the carts. There's some very large carts over there. Our thinking at the moment would be to focus our attention on the smallest cart for trash, possibly the medium-sized cart for recycling. But how would we comply with pay-as-you-throw? This is how we think we would do that. The contract under option B would provide every other week trash collection. So you could fill up that canister, and every other week the town would pay to have it picked up. If that's insufficient for your household, then you could contract separately with Casella to pick the trash up on the alternate week. That way, those that generate more trash are once again paying more. Those that effectively make use of diversion efforts like recycling and organics, composting, would pay less. And we make use of the carts involved in automated transition, and we achieve pay-as-you-throw by another means. So that's in effect option B. There is a little bit of ambiguity and uncertainty with option B, and I'd like to explain why. It all results around the trash. What we at the town have recognized is that not everybody has been particularly thrilled with the trash program within the town's current curbside collection program. Most notably, households with diapers have struggled with it. And what we have discovered over the years is that many of those households have taken matters into their own hands and have contracted separately for trash collection at their household. They will readily take the town's recycling collection. They'll readily participate in the town's organics collection. But on an individual household basis, they might choose to do away with the bag program, hire a company to come get the garbage and collect it weekly because of reasons that make sense in that household. So one of the things that a transition to automated collection frequently will result in is higher volumes of trash. Because if we put a cart like this in front of your house and say, go ahead and fill it, people are going to use it. And so we run the risk of increasing the volume of trash that gets collected. And because we pay on a per ton basis, there is some variability. And what we've shown, and this is on page 62 of the memo, is a comparison between what we're doing now and option B, but we show it in a low version and a higher version. At the present time, we've been able to negotiate a proposal for an increase in the per ton fee that would go from $110 presently to $125. We believe this to be a good pricing. We can go into why if the board would like to. And so option B on the low end, what this shows is just the volume we've been collecting today at the slightly higher rate. Option B on the high end shows both the increase in rate, but then doubles the volume. We don't know exactly that it would be doubled, but we show this in as an attempt to say there's some variability there and some uncertainty. We believe that if we provide carts to each of these households, they're likely to use it. And if they use it, the cost to get rid of the resulting garbage will increase. So option B is a good deal more expensive. You can see once again, we've got the fiscal 25 figures of 542, and we have option B on the low end and on the high end. On the low end, it's about 1.3 million. On the high end, it's about 1.4 million. These are significantly more expensive than what we've been paying for in the past. But there's an important thing to consider. While option B would be a far more expensive program to incorporate into the general fund, it's likely a lot less expensive for the users of this system. You remember the franchise fee. If everyone's participating in a franchise program, they would be spending about $1.375 million to get rid of the trash. But if you run the calculations based on option B, whether low or high, the universe of households would only be spending between $456,000 and $567,000 for that trash service. So while the program would be more expensive within the general fund, it would be less expensive for the households that the program serves in total. On the last page, page 64, we point out a couple of things, such as, for example, the cost per participating household. We also make note of, because we all recognize that we don't, in the town of Brattleboro, pay for these services through a user fee. They get incorporated into the property taxes. And so what's shown at the bottom of that table is the additional increase per $100,000 of assessed value for each of the three different variations, right? Option A and the low and high on option B. One question John and I were batting around earlier this afternoon was, well, wait a minute, what's the cost of the fiscal 25, right? So what then is the total cost of these things? So per $100,000, the fiscal 25 program is $44.50 per 100,000, meaning that total cost for option A is $79.40. And then option B ranges from $106 to $115. So in some ways, while this is an expensive program, it delivers a lot of service to a lot of people. And why don't I stop there? Because I've been rambling on for a little while. And we can see perhaps what these gentlemen would like to say, and then maybe talk about some of these options and your thoughts.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name's David Allen. I'm the market area manager for Casella, and that area includes Brattleboro. I've been with Casella I'm going on my 28th year. Todd is the operations manager for the Brattleboro location. I think Todd's been with for 20 years. So we've been doing this a while, and I will share with you that both John and Patrick have a grasp of something I've spent my entire career trying to get my hands around far better than any community we've worked with. That's been a blessing and a curse. It is not easy to negotiate with people that understand the metrics of your work almost as well as you do. But it was really a productive period of time. I hope you guys feel the same way. For me, and that's an outstanding summary, for me, I think what I want you to understand most is two things. One, why can't we just keep doing it the way we're doing it now? And it gives me an opportunity to tell a story about my son, which I love to do. And my son comes to me, who is a firefighter, and says, Dad, those guys that run into burning buildings for a living about 20 years ago decided that it was just too dangerous to hang a human being off the back of a truck and drive around town. But you still do it every day. And our industry, and our company in particular, has maybe been a bit slow to evolve, but we've made a commitment that we're not going to do what we know there is a better way to do. And that's really why we're not going to do it that way anymore. We spent the last 8-9 months eliminating all of our rear load containers. It may be obvious, a rear load is a container that dumps into the rear of a truck. And it's a very dangerous process where you have to pull a cable and the driver has to get out and stand next to this maybe 2,000-pound can in the air. That's how people get hurt. Automated collection allows that driver to operate a joystick and not get out of the truck. Patrick's right. The second reason is because the person coming in to see Todd looking for a job looks a lot more like me than my son. And you're not going to hang me off the back of a rear load truck for 9 hours a day picking up 8 tons of trash and be happy with the results. It's really important to understand why we're there. The second thing I think that is really important to understand in the context that Brattleboro does indeed have a Cadillac program, not just within Vermont, but I would say throughout New England, to collect all 3 of those waste streams is progressive. But like most communities, bag and tag programs or pay-as-you-throw programs, the metrics can be somewhat misleading. We believe that less than half of the households in Brattleboro actually use the bag program. And they're inconvenient. We totally understand. I started my career implementing bag and tag programs at municipalities. And often what you see is a dramatic drop in tonnage as soon as the program starts. Many communities will see 50, 60% drops, going from 10,000 tons a year to 5, but the recycling only goes up by 1,000 tons. The trash didn't disappear. It went somewhere else. And I think the point that Patrick made is it's important to recognize that. It certainly encourages recycling, but their impact is greater on the trash that ends up somewhere else, often at work, often at the curb at a town that doesn't have a pay-by program, a bag program. It is effective, but I think if you don't understand the data, you can come to the wrong conclusion. I think in Brattleboro, we believe you have a very high participation rate for recycling, a very high participation rate for compost or organics, but you have a very low participation rate in the trash program, and that's why. The big jump in cost is driven in large measure because we're proposing to do at least twice, maybe 3 times as much work than we're doing now, which is why the price is 2 to 3 times more. I really have to commend these guys, and like I said, we didn't get here easily. It was somewhat painful, but that was a great summary, and if I could answer any specifics, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you for the presentation. Very thorough. Thank you for that added detail. Select board members, questions for either of these presenters? We do have some questions from the administration that they would like us to consider, right? So, like, are we leaning towards A or B? Obviously, we're going to want to hear from the public as well, but let's kick it around here first of all. So. No? All right, fine. I'm allowed to speak, you know. I don't have to go last. But if someone is yearning to speak, I will recognize them. Richard, and then Franz, and then Liz.
So I know we've heard this before, but I'm so confused. Okay, so Plan B, we didn't talk about frequency though, did we?
Yeah, so Plan B would be every other week trash collection, every other week recycling, and weekly organics.
And the organics, now we use this little green thing now. What would the organics go in?
The organics would continue on in the same little green thing.
Oh, you can't use your arm for that.
If I may, it is the nut we haven't quite cracked yet. We're still trying to find a way. We know that less frequently food waste collection creates its own problems. It would allow a bigger container and maybe make it easier to collect with a mechanized piece of equipment. But going less than once a week is a bad idea. So we are proposing to continue to collect that manually until the industry or somebody smarter than me figures out how to do that with some kind of mechanized equipment.
Thank you. Any more questions, Richard?
So just to clarify, so the organics would be every week?
Correct.
And then trash and recycling would be every other week?
That is correct. That is a fair description of option B.
B. Whether it's the high or low?
Correct.
Doesn't matter.
The high or low is not a choice you make. It's just a reflection that there's some variability there.
Oh, okay. All right, I think I understand it now.
Anything else? No? Okay. Browns.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, gentlemen. It seems to me you really do know this business.
Thank you.
So I've got a few different questions, but I guess maybe the one that I'm thinking of right now is the extent to which that volume increase is likely to happen, that people are somehow getting rid of their trash in other ways under the current system rather than use the pay-as-you-throw bags. So, to me, if that were to double, that would be a lot. That'd be a very big increase, triple, even bigger. But I'm looking at the option B, low versus high price, and the differences between $1.3 million and $1.4 million. So it's basically a $100,000 difference, whether, based on what kind of an increase in trash volumes we would actually see. But what you just said was that accounts for a significant proportion of the increased expense that we're going to be facing as a community. But according to those numbers, we're already up to 1.3 million with the low volume, and we're only going up to 1.4 with the high volume. So it seems to me that the expense is really coming somewhere else than in the projected increase in volume. So that's a little bit of a long run around the barn, but it just seems to me that there's more costs built in elsewhere that don't have to do with the trash volume increase. And as I go through this, I'm trying to figure out, well, where are the costs coming in? I don't know if you have anything else you can offer on that.
If I could speak to that first?
Yep.
Would that be all right?
Yep.
Obviously, these gentlemen can speak to their pricing. I think there's an elephant in the room, sort of, which is our previous contract with Triple T. Looking back at the costs embedded within that contract, I have no idea how they accepted that. For a period of close to 10 years, there was but a 1% cost increase each year. What seems more and more accurate is that A, we didn't realize how good we had it, and B, the previous owners of Triple T were not investing for the future. They were taking what value they could get from their asset and wanted at all costs to maintain this contract. I think they knew they were going to sell at some point in time, and they did sell. And so whenever you're looking at, okay, we had this cost and now this cost is way up here, we have a tendency and a habit to say, well, explain yourself. In some instances, though, it may be, how do we explain the previous cost? It's just something to be mindful of.
And that's fine. I like that explanation. You can chime in as well. But it does seem to me that the increase in cost that we're facing is not primarily due to an increase in trash volume. It's primarily due to market
your
forces.
Your analysis is spot on.
Okay.
There is some variability in the additional trash volumes that would speak to additional costs, but the cost to collect is going up.
Okay.
To be sure.
Thank you. Liz?
I just have a more picayune question about pay-as-you-throw and these size carts, and how do they equate to the yellow and the purple bags? My household got along just fine with the yellow bag, and that just seems enormous to me, even the small.
They don't exactly, it's not a one-for-one relationship like this is like the yellow bag and that one's like the purple bag. Earlier this year, I think it was still winter, we reached out to the Agency of Natural Resources and wanted to inquire about what were the acceptable parameters in which we could both participate in pay-as-you-throw, but maybe do so differently. And the folks up at A&R were quite clear that it is acceptable in the eyes of the state to provide a base level of service. And as long as service above and beyond that base level, the household pays more for, then that meets the standard that the state would have us seek to meet. So if we were to provide a trash can the size of the small one, that would be our base service. And if a household said, but I need more than this, they could start by getting the off-week collection through an arrangement with Casella. They could perhaps work their way to, if they still needed more, they could work their way towards a second cart. So we have options, and ultimately pay-as-you-throw is concerned with associating the rise in the volume of trash with the price of trash.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I think Dave Allen might be able to explain like how many bags go in these different sizes. I don't know if you know that off your top of your head, or if we could get that information if you don't, but that might be helpful to understand kind of like every other week, how many bags are you throwing into those containers?
Sure. After we last met, we went back to the shop and did an experiment with bags. So, but if I may, before I do, there can't be an unlimited number of sizes, right? And it's important to recognize is because of the method of collection, we'll call it automated. That arm picks up the bin and dumps it over the top of a 11-foot high truck. If there is trash outside the bin, we cannot pick it up. So we tend to err on a little extra room. Otherwise, we go out and do our job and we leave trash on the street, and our DNA just doesn't allow that to happen. And so, we have it aired a little bit bigger. If you're talking about full-size 30-gallon, 33-gallon trash bag, the 96-gallon is going to hold 4 to 5. 33-gallon trash bag, by the time you tie it up, only has about 20 gallons in it, right? The 64 is 3 to 5, and the 48 is 2 to 4. It really, you take 10 people and tie up a 30-gallon trash bag, and they're all different sizes. Once you get to kitchen bags, the variability changes even more. You can fit as many as 11 to 13 in a 96-gallon, 7 to 9 in a 64. And we got anywhere from 5 to 9 in the 48. So, it's it's amazing how different your trash bag and mine are going to be when we fill them up. But it really depends on if you've got a teenager in the house. They're a little slow on getting the trash out of my house, so the bag tends to get a little bit more overfull. But again, I think it is important. The other reason is the smaller the cart. Imagine you're the driver. It is not a fine-tuned, delicate instrument. The smaller the cart, the harder it is to place that dime on its edge at the curb. And we find once we get below 48, we have a lot of carts tipped over behind our driver. And it looks messy, and that's not what we do for a living. Did that help?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks. Peter?
Yeah. So again, if we're just going to drill it down into the minutia of this conversation, I don't know if this is a you question or a you question, but what's to prevent electronics from going in those things? Because they're going overhead. The driver's never getting out. He can't see. Somebody put a small screen TV in there. Yeah. I mean, I assume that's nothing that is currently collected curbside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah.
Sure.
Nobody wants that one. I get it.
Yeah. So it's a risk, right? It is a trade-off. We know that the chances of that are slightly greater. There's technology out there that isn't mature yet with cameras that can identify things. But for the most part, once it's in, and that driver's doing exactly what they should be doing. They're concentrating on the road ahead of them. So that risk certainly does exist. We don't find it often. That material, that were we to do this service in Brattleboro, that would come back to our transfer station where it's observed again before it gets loaded into a larger truck and sent to its final point of disposal. So we are able to identify it there. We haven't seen a great deal of that in the other locations we've done this with. Certainly there is a greater chance of it, but we just don't see it quite as much as you might be concerned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I'd like to weigh in. So I think it's, really important to recognize for the members of the public, the select board's been aware of this negotiation for several months, and this is the first time that the members of the public are seeing, what it's led to. And so our previous contract, as Patrick alluded to, was remarkably cheap. This new contract is a lot less so, and that is going to be concerning to members of the public. It's concerning to myself as well. I also think that the option C that isn't on here, which is like, well, we're not going to have a contract with you or anyone else. We're going to figure it out. That's not on the table as far as I'm concerned. So what I want to make sure that the people of Brattleboro have is a level of service that is something that is acceptable to them for a price that they're happy, that they're okay with paying. Maybe not happy, but okay with paying. And so I think it's really important that we continue to have a service that does pick up compost every week, that picks up recycling. So recycling is going to go to every 2 weeks, right, which is a little different than what people have currently. But you'll have that sort of medium-sized container, and I could think about my own recycling and imagine that I'd do just fine. And you'll have trash picked up every other week in that smaller container, which Dave just kind of described how many bags you could get into, and I could imagine squishing a bunch of bags down in there. It's a lot more money than what people were used to paying. I think when I looked at the bottom line numbers, that's a little hard to swallow. I was grateful for the per $100,000 of assessed value because it allowed me to think like, okay, what is the actual reality of this as far as my own home? And, I can only speak from my own experience, I guess, and also represent the entire town of Brattleboro. In option A, my home's it's assessed at $170,000. Lord knows what it'll be assessed at next time we do the thing. And in our current contract, in the current budget, that's $75 a year out of tax dollars going towards solid waste. In option A, which would be recycling every 2 weeks, which is less good than what we currently have, and compost every week, and no trash pickup, that would double almost to $134 for my household. That's not acceptable to me. Option B is somewhere between $180 and $195 a year out of my tax bill that goes towards solid waste. It's about $120 more than what I'd be paying right now. But I'm willing to pay it. I'm willing to, I want us to have a contract with a solid waste company that will allow for the level of service that people in this community have come to expect. And so as my own household, I'm willing to kind of swallow that number. And I don't think we should be going down the road of saying, you know what, everyone, figure it out yourself. Figure out the trash yourself. There will be many, many households where there are elderly people, disabled people, people with limited means who will not be able to figure it out. And that will lead to, trash piling up. It will lead to health and safety issues. And I think that we kind of owe it to the people of Brattleboro to make sure that we, provide them with a good level of service. I just wish it was a little bit cheaper. Liz.
I just want to say something that I hardly ever say, and that is, I agree with everything Dana just said.
Oh, that's nice of you. We agree on plenty of things. Come on, what are you talking about? All right, let's hear from the public. And we're at about 25 minutes past our scheduled break right now, so I'd like to kind of take a break at about 8:45, which should be ample time for David Levenbach to speak.
Thank you, David Levenbach, District 9. I don't fault staff on any of this. I just want to emphasize the point, which I think is pretty clear even from Patrick's discussion, that what we're looking at is a significant tax increase. And there are other decisions you have made or will be making. So this is not the only shock to the system. And that would be all I would say. And personally, I will say I would prefer option A, but that's just me. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'm going to go to Zoom. Mr. Oza.
I think I'm good. Bob Ozer, Brattleboro. I'll make this very brief since we're coming up on a break. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate the automated collection and the reason for the automated collection. And obviously, safety is the number one concern on that. Last couple of months, I've been experimenting with self-hauling. And in figuring out the options for self-hauling, and maybe I'm atypical, but maybe a small bag of trash every month. Add that to the sticker price. I'm at about $120 for the year, which is about where option B low is, if you look at the numbers that Patrick gave. Then again, there are certain streets in Brattleboro that may not accommodate an automated collection. There are streets that have no sidewalks. Where do those containers go? And will they become traffic obstructions? Or is there a different program for those streets where you can't do automated? Personally, I would still like the option to opt in or opt out. I don't know if that's possible, but that's where I'm at. And thank you very much for the time.
Anyone in the room who wishes to speak? Yes, Tom. I had my blank.
I know you know my name.
I know. Hi, Tom.
What time I forgot my own father's name because I was introducing him, so I know about brain farts. Tom Osikowski, Brattleboro. I would just express, I have a couple questions, but I guess I'll express my preferences first so that way then I can sit down for the answers to the questions. I would also echo that I would like to pay based off how much I use, not be paying for, not to have no trash users, such as commercial properties and apartment buildings and such, paying for, and low trash users, such as myself and my household, pay for moderate or high trash users. although it may still comply with the state's so-called unit-based pricing, I think it really diminishes the spirit of it, let's say.
Can I just ask for clarification? Are you saying that you would prefer option A, where the town doesn't have a trash contract?
Yes, or more generally, if there's some other way that the preference I stated could be satisfied, but A is much closer to that than B, yes.
Okay.
A concern I do have is that with these containers, I think electronics and construction debris and other things that are taken out currently by the pay-as-you-throw bags, because they're not allowed in those things, will just make it into the waste stream. I don't think that will be slight. I think it'll be significant. It's kind of a pain, and there's confusion for a lot of people about where do they bring this stuff, and they have to bring it to another place, and they have to drive it. So I could see people just cutting up some furniture in half and shoving it in there and doing all sorts of things. Now, that would be a great convenience for people, not denying that, but would it align with the stated laws and where things are supposed to go? I don't think it would. And then the other thing is, maybe you could guess this, but I think that of the three options proposed, the smallest one, that's grossly much more than my household needs of 4 people. And so I'd like a smaller size, or for pickup to be much less often, just some way to reflect both what the household pays, or just either directly or through their property tax, that it reflects their low level of use, and then higher amounts of use than are borne by them as a use fee, not just a flat base fee. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, Patrick.
There was something Tom mentioned that I'd like to speak to for a second, if that's all right.
Very well.
I think, as Dave pointed out, there is a risk that people could put unwelcome items in the trash cart. That's somewhat unavoidable. However, there is something that's not included in the memo. I haven't discussed just yet. We continue to sort of discuss and work together on coming up with a system. But when we finally come back to you with a contract, one of the elements that we'd like to include within that is a potential large item collection program. Whether that turns out to be quarterly or monthly, we haven't altogether nailed down. But one of the things that households in Brattleboro have historically struggled with is, okay, I bought a new couch. What do I do with this? Or I got a new mattress, and what do I do with that? And so, rather than wait for those things to be cut into small pieces and stuffed into one of these carts, we would like to provide an ancillary service that would help residents deal with large item removal.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Yep. Let's go to iPhone on Zoom. Good evening, welcome. If you could just introduce yourself after you've unmuted. Okay. We're almost there. I can see sort of blank screen. Here we go. Welcome.
Oh,
if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, it's me, Caitlin. I am on my phone instead of computer.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hi. I once again, everything y'all talk about in the select board meetings relates back to all of the services that people in our community are struggling with. So y'all talked about diaper pickup. Are there going to be options for public disposal of trash for people who are homeless to put diapers in? For places that people can put household trash if they don't have an address to pick up at? That's a real question. Like one of the main barriers, sanitation barriers are some of the main barriers that people who are experiencing housing insecurity in our community face. I'm super happy to hear this town-wide conversation, or I guess I wish it was town-wide, but the select board meeting based conversation around sanitation services? And will there be options for people who are living on the street and who are experiencing diapering, for example, or literally every daily sanitation need, to throw their trash away without being further villainized by this community?
Okay, thank you. Patrick? Or
Yes.
Gentleman from Casella, are you able to speak to that?
So, I would say a couple of things to the caller. First is, they mentioned sanitation for folks living out of doors. Stick around later in the meeting. There'll be an item that addresses that to some degree at the transportation center. So I would say stick around for that. Secondly, with respect to trash and recycling, particularly in the downtown, we have public trash cans and public recycling cans, and those are collected regularly. So I'd like to think there's been some effort already for providing public trash and recycling options to anybody who might need it in the downtown.
Great, thank you. That's kind of what I said, what I would have said, so glad that I'm on the right page. Other members of the public? Mr. DeGray.
Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. The trash pickup in this town is 50% subsidized by commercial properties and businesses. We pay for it, but we don't get that service. I'd like to have somebody actually show me a figure of what the trash and recycling would be if it was only on the users of the program. Because I'm going to get taxed for something that I don't get to use. Having said that, talk to me a little bit about the compliance officer. If the people from Casella have any experience in this, or how did we come up with this figure to have a marshal to go around and make sure that the people are using this service if it is an exclusive contract?
So I think the presence of the compliance officer is really speaking to what we would expect to see if we did not provide a trash service. So we might expect to see households with trash piling up because of a variety of reasons why they may not be self-hauling it. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding, if Patrick or John wants to correct me.
I think that's correct. I think that there's one other alternate scenario. We have fairly limited code enforcement capability in town, and this would be taking on potentially, particularly if you went with either of the options A, a significant number of additional actions required of the town. So you'd have trash collecting at locations, and we'd have to address that. That could take some time, but the other component of the enforcement would be the town administration gets a call from these gentlemen and says, we stopped by 123 Main Street or, some address that's covered by the program, and we see that there's a dumpster there provided by one of our competitors. We offered you a franchise rate. We have exclusive access to this universe of customers, and we are asking you to live up to your end of the deal. So we would need to get involved, and in order to address that, we're proposing that there be additional code enforcement capacity.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public with questions on this matter, and then I'd like to come back to the board and see if we can give the staff some guidance. Okay, seeing none. So board, do we still want to see both options A and B the next time we consider this? That is my question to you. AKA, would we like to get out of providing trash pickup or not?
I mean, I'm not a fan of that option.
Okay, me neither. Richard?
I would not want to entertain A.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Me neither.
Okay, France?
Well, as I've said on some other occasions, I think it would be worth investigating how this is managed in other Vermont communities that don't provide trash collection.
Okay.
I do understand the limitations and potential problems, and I can easily imagine that people in those other towns would say something like, oh, this is a nightmare. And I think the convenience and likely high rates of participation in the Casella program have tremendous value. I remain a little bit reluctant to plant both my feet there, though, because I know that some other places do adopt something like Plan A, and I just wonder how that goes.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like there's a majority of us that are more interested in option B, which is a service pretty comparable to what we have today. And so let's bring that forward for a decision on the next time we consider this. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your presentation. Patrick, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm going to say that we're going to take a quick break until 8:45. And so we're back. The next item on our agenda is review of debt management guidelines. And Select Board, in light of, in light of the time, I would like to propose that we table the review of debt management guidelines to our next, to a future meeting to be named later. Is that acceptable?
It is to me.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't want to overpromise that it would be to our next regular meeting because I know that that's stacking up. So it seems like there's unanimous consent from the board to table that item, review of debt management guidelines, to a future meeting.
Mm-hmm.
No need for a vote on that. Very clear. Okay, so then we are going to table that. So the next item on our agenda then is the police substation plan. And I think Patrick Morland is going to make another presentation.
Sure, happy to. I'm hoping my colleague A.C. Evans is lingering.
Assistant Chief Evans is
somewhere
lingering.
Nearby.
He's recognized. He can come to this table.
Excellent. For those in the audience, if you haven't seen, there's some drawings here that sort of show what's being proposed. There's a memo in the board's backup. I'll try and walk through it, and I would like to leave the sort of programming or the use of space to A.C. Evans, who was more directly involved in planning, how the use of space would be. But consistent with the board's discussion about downtown safety action, we are presenting concepts here for a police substation and ancillary services at the Brattleboro Transportation Center on the ground floor in the space that had previously occupied Experience Goods and Dottie's. There are three main components to the designs as presented. The first is the police substation. The second is a community meeting space. And lastly, there are space for permanent, 24-hour-a-day, publicly accessible restroom facilities that would be outward-facing from the building and could be accessed by anyone in need of utilizing the bathroom anytime, day or night. The square footage for each of these different programmatic elements is right front and center on your on the front page of the memo. We've got about 2,100 square foot of police substation, 1,600 foot of community meeting space, and public restrooms of about 218 square feet.
Hey, Patrick, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry, folks. I know that you feel like you're whispering, and there aren't very many people here, and it's hard to focus on Patrick. Thank you.
So taken in total, that is about 3,970 square feet. We then met with a couple of different project managers and developers in the area, both of which have specific knowledge about the construction of the Brattleboro Transportation Center. So one would be Scott McCusick, who's been doing quite a bit of project management for us over the year, and the other was Steve Horton. And we asked them to take a look at these designs and to take into consideration their knowledge of the building space itself. And together, they each landed on $275 a square foot for redevelopment of this space. That would yield a project of about just under $1.1 million. We think with some additional furnishings that'll be necessary, conference table, desks for the staff, etc., that would add likely about $40,000, bringing the total budget estimated cost for this project to just over $1.1 million. Now, as has been brought up already this evening and has been brought up at recent meetings, and it will be brought up, I'm sure, several times in the future, there have been a lot of increased costs coming to the taxpayers of Brattleboro. So staff would be particularly hesitant to recommend borrowing to make this substation and ancillary space a reality. And while it's located in an asset of the parking fund, it would be a general fund activity, that being the police department activity, that would be occupying the space. And so the parking fund certainly doesn't have enough money to make this vision real. And it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for us to charge the use of that space to the general fund, because that's tantamount to just taking on debt in the general fund. So while it is a difficult recommendation to make, staff would suggest that it is possible for the board to make this happen utilizing funds from the town's revolving loan fund. Some will say, hey, wait a minute, town revolving loan fund dollars, shouldn't that be limited to affordable housing and economic development? And there's yes and no, mostly no. Anytime the town would be applying for funds from the Vermont Community Development Program for a CDBG grant, in that instance, it's exceedingly clear. Those funds can only be used for affordable housing or economic development that creates new jobs. When those funds are provided to the town and the town loans them out and the money comes back, that money becomes unrestricted revenue. And if you will take a look at and I probably should have included it in the backup, the select board adopted protocol for the town's revolving loan fund, there is a category of expenditures select board discretionary. And so while a project of this size and scope would be a significant hit to the town's revolving loan fund, it is a permissible use for the town's revolving loan fund. And if you take a look at the second page of the memo, we endeavor to take a look at what would be the impact to the town's revolving loan fund if you were to approve this project using that source of funds. We have a cash balance presently of about $2.5 million. There's several different projects and programs for which funds are sort of set aside and earmarked for future uses. That would bring us to an available balance of about 1.8, assuming the board chooses to move forward with a solid waste program that make use of carts such as these. That would be staff's recommendation once again for that new development, again, in an effort to try and reduce the impact to the taxpayer. Available for this project would be a little over 1.3 million. The project's estimated to cost about 1.1 million, leaving an estimated balance in the RLF post-project, post-transition in solid waste of about $255,000, which is, is about where it's been for the last bunch of years. So you would finish this challenging time period with all these, new and demanding costs landing all kind of at the same time, with a RLF that has a balance that's not a whole heck of a lot different than it's been for the last several years. So that is the recommendation if you choose to move forward. And I will ask Jeremy if you wouldn't take a few minutes and maybe talk through some of the space programming and what's being achieved in that environment.
Thanks, Patrick. Jeremy?
Sure. We've worked extensively with the space, worked with the person that we had working on the drawings for us, spent a lot of time down there looking at how things would work for us and what space would be needed. This space would be where the 4 Brat team members would work out of on a daily basis. Since we want them downtown, we want them actually downtown their entire time, along with our community resource specialist, who we already have, Justin Johnston. He would also have his office there. There would also be space for patrol officers and investigators to have space down there as needed when interviewing witnesses, victims, those types of things, and just any sort of investigatory things that are happening downtown to make it as convenient as possible for people who live and work right downtown. And that goes for our social workers as well. We have 2 police social workers currently on staff, looking to hire 1 more if anyone knows one. But they would also be able to have office space there as well. So we'd have a large complement of staff that would be regularly using that space. I think I forgot parking too. We're going to adjust the parking office. The parking office itself is vastly undersized for the staff that are using it. I think that's me being nice too. So we moved them to a better space that I think would be better for them, better usability for them, but also easier for the public too, because it would have their forward-facing window right out on Flat Street. And as far as like the space specifics, I'm happy to speak to anyone that anyone has in particular on that, rather than just random go off of things.
Would you speak to the CJIS compliant area?
Sure. So
and explain what that acronym is.
Sure. Criminal Justice Information Services. So there's certain areas of the police department that you have to have clearances through the state to be able to access. And that's because of information and computer systems that are in those spaces. So areas that have computers where like criminal records on people can be run or viewed, things like that, where it's like confidential information on people. We have certain areas of the department that have those restrictions. And if we don't have those restricted areas, then we lose our ability to do those things as a department. So every facility we have, like any police facility you see throughout the state, has different areas like that where you have to have certain certifications to be allowed in them.
Great, thank you. Anything else you want to share with us about this design and how it would relate to the actual work that's going on in it?
Sure. I personally see this as a positive, real positive thing for that area of town. This is a area of town that we all know is kind of a center, a hotspot for us for criminal activity and for behaviors that have caused a litany of select board meetings to go long, and for good reason, I think. And we have a perfect space there, I think, that we can use. Right now we have several commercial spaces down there that for many reasons we're unable to rent. But having this substation down there, I think, can change the dynamic of that entire area and really help not just the police department with its investigatory abilities, but also I think can help the town as a whole change the dynamic of that area and be able to use those spaces more effectively.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Okay, board members, questions. We're not making a decision about this tonight, so this is a great opportunity to ask questions, to give some feedback, to seek some feedback. With that being said, Richard.
Looking at this plan, would I be correct in assuming that if this was done, this project, the police project, that the rest of the rentables, the rest of the space there would be fixed up enough to possibly generate some income?
You want to address that, Patrick?
Yeah, so there is some work going on at the transportation center today to try and address some of the water infiltration issues that have been existing in that space for too long. That work is underway. We are hopeful that that work will be effective and that will help to provide a usable space for the programming that's been outlined for you. The remaining space would be available for other uses that it could include leases, to provide a source of income, or for, some other municipal use. We haven't really defined what that space will be used for just yet, but it certainly could be available for lease income.
What would the time frame be? Say we approved this project, when would it be done and operational?
That's a great question, and one I don't have a clear answer for. We have been working rather feverishly to try and bring these plans forward, and to get a sense as to, is this something the board is interested in pursuing? If the answer to that appears to be yes, then certainly we should be taking a look at when could we get this done. I know we're doing the membrane work. I want to make sure and give you a correct answer. So when we return, we'll have a stronger answer to how quickly we think this could be put into place.
Great, thank you. Other board members? Liz, and then Franz.
Well, I've been an advocate of this plan for years, and I think that it solves a land use problem that has been created on Flat Street that the Assistant Chief mentioned. I believe in select board discretion, and I believe in the use of the revolving loan fund for this purpose. But I still believe that the town should be exploring state and federal grants, such as perhaps for public toilets and for police uses. I wonder, and I think it just fits nicely with all the plans that we're doing, including the Brat team. I wonder, I don't know which gentleman can tell me, how the restrooms will be maintained and certain aspects of the restroom that need public discussion.
How
Are either of you
maintained?
Yes.
Forgive me.
For the record, Petra looks confused. What about if we said it like this? Who will maintain the restrooms?
So we have two custodians down at that location presently. They've been involved with the creation of this plan. And, we recognize that any restroom facility that would be made available to the public 24 hours a day, there will come a day when, this particular facility needs to be taken out of service. And so one of the reasons why the plan includes 4 different little restrooms is essentially to have that be available, right? If somebody is not available to come in and clean, let's say the mess that's occurred in this particular room, we'll have the ability to close that one and still provide 3 others. And so with the staff coming and going, we think, that's been sort of part of the planning, right?
Great.
The ability to shut certain of the facilities offline as need be, as staff are available to come and do cleanup.
Great, thank you.
And am I correct in thinking that the composition or the materials used in the restroom will be easy to maintain and long wearing, let's say?
The plan would be to essentially be able to open the door and hose everything down and proceed to a drain, and to have these be as sturdy and easy to clean as feasible.
Thank you.
I think, Franz, you had a question?
Yes, indeed. So, Assistant Chief Evans. There's been a lot of talk about police substation in the transportation center in particular, but this is the first actual visualized plan that I've seen. It's so far up to this point, it's just been a couple of words, police substation. And this is not what I was expecting to see as what we'd be looking at in that location. There's a lot of this that I like, but really what I was envisioning was, adequate room for a couple of people, a few people to sit down, do some work, interact with the public. Because really what I've heard the public asking for is just better access to the police officers and ability to interact with them better. And in fact, what we've got here is like a little mini police station. Now, maybe that makes sense, but it's it's beyond the scope of what I was thinking about, and I can't say what everybody else was speaking about, but for a lot of people, I don't think it really looks like this. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like this, but the cost is very high, certainly more than I was thinking, maybe a third of the price tag that we're getting with this. For example, the communication, the information systems room, that certainly wasn't anywhere on my radar screen. Now, we have expanded the size of the police department significantly, and one of my questions is, if we didn't do something like this, where would the BRAT team be? Where would the new officers be? Where would the resource specialists be, et cetera? Is this a response to a lack of space up on Black Mountain Road with the expansion of personnel in the department?
I can tell you that we currently don't have the space for all those personnel at the police station. So, and adding the community resource specialist is a unique position that we would have to. We don't have the capability of housing at the police station right now, so that's a whole nother aspect of what we would have to look at to create space for. But I'm pretty confident. I wasn't involved in when we built the station we're currently in, so Patrick may have different information, but my understanding is it wasn't built with the idea that we would expand larger than we were. So there was no plans built into that for expansion.
So to add 4 on the BRAT team, resource specialist, 3 level 3 officers, and the data analyst. Is this?
And
is
the 3,
that
if you add the 3 police social workers or the police liaisons in as well, that wasn't in our planning before either. So we've opened up some closets that we had storage space in and things like that, and rearranged that as much as possible to make room for those individuals.
So that's part of the reason for this amount of space.
Yes, sir.
Now, and is it possible for you or for others to envision, do you think, a smaller alternative to this, where it really is just kind of a more modest attempt to provide some office-type space for people who are on duty downtown, to interface with the public and respond to calls and stuff like that. Is there some other alternative to this that it would make sense to look at?
And it's okay if you don't have the answer for that question.
I don't have a
Because
good
Patrick
answer
is
for you right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Patrick.
Hello. So while Jeremy's contemplating that, I would say, the overall square footage being proposed to renovate is 3970. But if some portion of this were seen as excessive, right? If for example, the community meeting space was not a function that you would wish to serve, you could carve, for example, about $450,000 out of the estimated cost.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Is there a documented version of that we could look at?
No.
It's really just the math. It's the square footage times the estimated average square foot cost. So, if you wanted to, nix that portion of the facility, you could say, well, we don't want to do that. And approximately, the project would drop by approximately that amount.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bronze, are you finished with your questions? We want to make some time for other people.
Well, go ahead.
Thanks. Peter, you want to have something?
Yeah, I think this addresses a lot of the conversations that we've been having ongoing. It adds in the public bathrooms, which a lot of this community has been asking for. I like the environment in which we're putting them. I feel as though this gives us a fighting chance to supply a good amenity to this town and the folks that would have to utilize it. So I'm a fan of that. I was curious, Liz said something about maybe exploring some state and federal grants for that. I'm not opposed to kind of going down that road. I don't know. I'm not a federal grant or state guy, but if you say it, I got to believe that something out there might exist. So I wouldn't mind exploring that. So I guess it's more of a statement than a question. There it is.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just speak to it for a minute. So I think it's actually a pretty bold proposal and really turns what is a moribund space. That's a fancy word. That is a space right now that has been empty for quite some time. Having spaces that are inactive, it's just bad for our community. This is going to be a good use of the space for the police department. It's going to be a good use of space for the sort of liaisons that we have in the community, including like HCRS folks, but also like the outreach teams that will most likely work, with the BRAT team. I think it's fixing some working conditions that the parking staff have had to endure for a number of years. The provision of 4 public bathrooms in our downtown is actually a massive deal. And like last year when we were discussing the ARPA budget, Ian and I were trying to convince you guys to use some of that free ARPA money to build some public bathrooms. And unfortunately, we didn't go for it. We're going to get 4 public bathrooms for less money than we would have had to use from ARPA. The community meeting space, I want to kind of hear more about. Like, I'm in favor of it. Like, the community meeting space in the co-op gets a lot of use by a lot of different entities. I know our library meeting rooms get a lot of use. Having a space there, I could imagine all kinds of ways in which it might be used productively. But I want to maybe seek more feedback from people in the community about how they would want to use that space. But I think at least building the shell of it is, if you build it, they will come, right? And then we should actually give people the kind of spaces that they need to work in, because when people have those spaces, they're more likely to be able to do a good job. I have 2 offices. One of them is a cubicle. I hate it. I don't have a window. It makes me miserable. The other one, has a door that I can close and a window, and I'm much happier there. And I dare say that when people are happier in their working life, that they also do a better job. And so I think we should, invest in decent working conditions for our staff. The thing that sticks in my craw a little bit is the use of the revolving loan fund. This is us. This is not a loan. We are, we are saying we're going to spend this money. We're not expecting it to come back. But I'm willing to suck it up. This is an idea that has support in the community in a few of its facets. It's something that people have asked for, both in the police substation idea, but also the downtown bathrooms. And I think that the community meeting space is a nice bit of added value. And so I'm willing to kind of suffer the opportunity cost of the revolving loan fund. Now, if a state or federal grant is available between now and us spending the money, great. But there's work that needs to go into doing that as well. But if we know of grants that are available, yes, of course, we should apply for them. And so I would encourage us to, move forward with this. We've already taken a bunch of steps this summer and now fall that, we're actually kind of controversial, right? And when I'm out in the world, people are saying to me, hey, thank you. Not me, but us. And I want to give you guys the tools you need to do the job, right? I want to actually follow through on some of this plan. And so I would urge the rest of you all to get on board and let's make this a reality. Soapbox done. Elizabeth, and then Jeremy.
Once again tonight, I agree with what Daniel said. But I do want to mention that this money from the revolving loan fund has already been lent out and has come back.
That's a good point.
And that's why we have the opportunity to use it for our needs.
Thank you for reminding me of that.
You're welcome.
Jeremy, did you want to say something?
I did. I just I feel like Franz didn't get his whole question answered, and I just wanted to get back to that for him. I think between Patrick and I and Robin, we did a lot of work down there deciding on what space to use. There's a lot of space down there. A lot of it that we didn't use because we don't think we needed it. I think we took a long look at what was necessary for us to use and responsible for us to use. I've been an employee of the town for going on 30 years. I've lived in town for many of those. Was a taxpayer here for a long time. I get those concerns. I feel those. I work the last couple of years. I've been working on our budget. I really pay attention to that because I think that's a big responsibility that we're given to make sure that we're responsible with what we have and we don't ask for what we don't need to do our jobs effectively. And I feel like the plan that we came up with is the most reasonable option that we could come up with that would give our staff a good space to use productively to serve the community, especially downtown, as much as we can, as with the best benefit to the area.
Thanks, Jeremy. Richard?
Well, this plan does solve a lot of problems that we've been talking about. It's pretty clear to me that, if we don't do this, we're still going to have to do some of these pieces anyway, and it all seems to come together. Wanted to throw one more thing out, though. There was some talk a little while back about lockers, public lockers, and I read that study in Northampton that they did, and that was one of their solutions to some of the problems they had on the streets. So I'm just wondering if we could consider that in the plan as to look at the feasibility of adding public lockers.
Yeah, I love that. Liz?
I don't. I think that there's social service agencies who provide lockers and they can provide more.
Well, I can tell you that the one social service agency in town that does provide lockers doesn't have enough to even meet the needs of the people that are in that facility. And so, that's
all the reason for them to get some more.
Right. And you don't just get some more, right? So I actually think that given that we have right now we have a design, right, and a rectangle. And we could be thinking about ways to build some amount of lockers into this, at least get some information about that. And then you can vote against it.
Well, I'm not nodding my head now,
Yeah.
and I don't know if there are 3 head nods to pursue that.
Yeah. Anyone else interested in hearing more about whether lockers could be incorporated into this design?
Sure, why not?
Great. Sounds like there are 3
There you
people
go.
interested. All right, good. Anyone else want to say something from the board? We are really dragging on time here. I see you. I'm going to come to you next, I promise. Okay, board is done, it seems like. Let's go Tom, Dick. I wish we had a Harry, but we don't. We'll go Tom, Dick, Caitlin, and then Kate.
Tom Mosikowski, Brattleboro. I have a comment or question or two, and I'd say it's based upon what I hope I understood correctly, which is that all of the white space that looks like rooms on this plan is going to be protected by that membrane that's having work being done and is going to be opened up to have, whether or not this plan involves work being done in those white rooms or not, it's going to open up the opportunity for those spaces to be rented for commercial uses and whatnot. And so what I've also heard is that this area has been, unfortunately, commercial uses have been absent for a couple of years, moribund. It's been a ghost building on the first floor. I made that one up. And that this will help revitalize the area. I think we can do both. If we don't take these, the yellow, the 2 shades of yellow, the green, the red, and the blue, and put them front and center, but we put them in the back or along the back side of the alley, that kind of activates and adds safety to that area while also opening up the entire front to potentially 4, or let's just say 5 commercial spaces. So I feel like we could do both, and the commercial spaces would absolutely be more attractive to lease by having the police department there. I mean, a police substation there. More eyes on the area and enforcement. And then maybe also there'd be a benefit if the police or BRAT team is walking frequently up and down the alley, they'd be passing by those public bathrooms. Not that that's their job, but more eyes on those entryways instead of being around the building from where it looks like they're going to enter. Seems like a benefit as well to me.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Dick?
I like Franz. I don't support this plan. Deja vu all over again. I can remember in 2013, the bond that we passed was to redo the police station here and all the fire stations. And that's what the voters passed. And that didn't happen. The police department moved out of town, and people were crying to have a substation. And the police department was going, we don't need a substation. We don't need a substation because we can get downtown in 2.5 minutes. So we don't need to go and spend this money. But be that as it may, you were talking about an unutilized space. And the reason that's unutilized is because of what's going on down there. And hopefully with the BRAT team walking around, that would clear up some of that activity. And then this would be a wanted space like it was before. I do not think it needs a community room if this is going to go forward. There's a community room in the fire station that's never used. It's never publicized it's there, but it's there. We have space at the library. We have space at the rec department. We have space here. And so why do we need to spend another $450,000 on a space that may get used sometimes, but it's not going to be used all the time? And with the board having one of their priorities to support housing, then that money could go back to what one of your goals is to support housing. You don't need a community space down there. Now, I think this is overkill, and I'm going to be a minority. I think that the board, with all due respect, has overreacted. The police department, I asked John a question 2 weeks ago about how many police officers do we have active. I finally got a hold of the chief. I had a conversation with her today. We have 22 police officers. We haven't even hit our quota that we were looking for of 27, and the board approved $800,000 to get 3 more additional officers. And we don't even know what we can do with 27, and now you approve 3 more. I would hope that somebody on the board would make a motion, the 3 that voted for it, a motion to reconsider and hold that vote. I'm not saying we don't need the police officers, but let's find out once we get our full complement of 27, do we need to get those 3 officers right away? Because it takes a long...
I would say at this point we're not germane.
Well, it is germane because all of it has a huge tax impact on us.
Yeah.
And so
if we could
that's
keep it
one
to
of my
the substation.
points. And going back to the point, not all of these people are going to be in here at the same time. And so I would agree with, if this is going to be here, remove the conference room and put this space back so that if we can get rental income, and that's a question I do have for you, is what is the municipality going to pay rent to the transportation fund? And I hope when that comes back, that's part of what it is. And also, let's have a brief discussion about what the residual cost is, because this is going to be another facility that we're going to have to maintain.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Caitlin, on Zoom, iPhone.
So y'all are using a lot of language that was given to you by the Community Safety Review Board, whose actual recommendations you have thrown out. I find myself agreeing with Dick DeGray, which he might not agree with my agreeing with, but people have been asking for years for Dotties and the old experience goods to be used for community space. Flat Street is not a zombie apocalypse street. It is a street where people feel safe hanging out, where you don't feel safe hanging out. If people would come and interact with your neighbors, you would see that it's fine. But in the meantime, the ground level Dotties and experience goods, which used to be a vibrant, I grew up here again, that used to be a vibrant place. Everyone would hang out. The town could be spending money to turn that into public bathrooms. John Potter, our homeless friend Lisa, has met with you multiple times to offer you suggestions for that space and for suggestions for the town. I'm just watching you put your head down. Anyway.
Address the board.
Oh, sorry. Don't do. Oh, yes. Sorry. Okay. So to the board.
It's a select board meeting.
Sure. So the select board has, for the past 5 select board meetings, pushed through agendas that a huge majority of the town is not in favor of. You have taken no time to come out and find alternate ways of hearing people's responses. You have heard, I'm sure, from all of us, the amount of people, not the amount of people who have signed the petitions, but also the amount of people power, and town passion that has gone into at least asking you to take more time to consider how you are spending community safety budgets, how and when you are listening to your community members, and whether you are just listening to business owners or whether you are bothering to come outside and listen to the actual people in your town. No one wants to be living in a town with more, well, I shouldn't say that. Some people think that more cops equals more safety. I think that the current ratio of cops to town is fine. I think that you are desperately grasping for solutions that are police-based. I know you're going to turn me off, but you are choosing the wrong path. You are choosing to use people's suggestions
turn them against us and not listen to actual people in your community. Do not do this. Thank you.
And we're going to go to Kate and then Lisa, and then we're going to see where we're at. And again, a reminder to the select board that this is not something we're taking a vote on tonight. We're getting some feedback. So,
Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. And sometimes when a lot, not just sometimes, a lot lately when I come to these meetings, I feel like I live in a town that's in a different financial situation than the people that sit up here in the front of the room. And I become a little bit concerned with the use of things like the revolving loan fund. It's become sort of a trend for you folks to sort of spend down all kinds of different pots of money. You did a project that I really wanted you to do, which is fixing the transportation center, but you spent $300,000 out of the community safety fund, and we don't have any money left there. The last meeting, you spent $675,000 out of the unassigned fund balance, and you don't even know what the unassigned fund balance has in it. And now you're talking about spending $1.1 million out of the revolving loan fund, which is going to draw that down. And I think from a financial perspective, and I really hope you'll think this through, is that a wise financial policy to become spending down all of these pots of money that are there for an intended purpose? I think it's really short-sighted, and I think it's going to, you may do it this year, but what are you going to do next year when there's no money in those pots? So I'd be really, really careful about this. Think long-term, not just what you want to do tonight. And I also agree 100% with spending $450,000 on a community room is not a good use of money. And just because you say you have $1.1 million doesn't mean you should spend $450,000 of that on a community space. So I would urge you to be really, really thoughtful in what you're spending the money on, what money you're spending, because there's long-term consequences to what decision you make with this project on our long-term financial, scenario in this town.
Thanks, Kate. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm the chair of the Boys and Girls Club. And I just want to add a voice of positivity and say that we've asked for this substation for a long time, whether it has a community room or not. I'll be happy that there is a police substation on Flat Street. And I just want to say thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thanks, Lisa. So this is an item where we were getting a presentation, we were taking a look at it, we were hearing select board opinions, hearing community opinions. It's going to come back at a future meeting for a decision. I think in light of the time and the fact that we have two other items on the agenda, I'd like to move on unless there's any final things that the board would like to say tonight. Okay. So we're going to move on. Chief, Assistant Chief, thank you so much. Thank you. Patrick, thank you for the presentation. We're going to move on to item F, which is the quarterly fire department report. Was slated for, I think, 8:45, and here we are at 9:30. Fire department staff, we've got Chief Howard, we've got Superintendent Fritz, we've got Assistant Chief Kerr. Welcome. It's nice to see you folks. There's a memo in the backup that everyone has read, and we're happy to hear your presentation.
Thank you. We're here tonight doing from July 1st to September 30th, our quarterly report. At the beginning, you can see that we've been busy fire-wise, and fire prevention is finishing up Zone 4 of the zones for apartment buildings to be inspected, which will bring us to one complete time through the 4 zones. The first chart that you will find is our EMS response data, and we've included the FY 2024 the whole year, and then we've included quarter one of 2024 and quarter one of 2025. Some key points that I want to note in there is average time to the scene. We have improved that. It was 4 minutes and 28 seconds in quarter one of 24, and now we're down to 3 minutes and 55 seconds in quarter one of 2025. Average dispatch to clear time, you can see it was 25:36 in quarter one of 24, and now it's 34 minutes and 43 seconds in quarter one of 2025. And the reason it has increased a little bit is because Dr. Storn, who does our QA and QI program, has encouraged us to stay on scene longer, do a better assessment, a longer assessment, and do more interventions. And staff has done that and is working forward by doing that. You can see that the need for 2 ambulances from quarter one of last year to this year has gone up some, and as well as the need for 3 ambulances. The last time we were here, the board asked for some high acuity responses that we go to, and we listed these out in July, August, and September. And you can see the variations from each month. But overall, mental health and psychiatric and overdose calls are two of the biggest that lead that response. We certainly could break it down more, but I think this is more on the line of what you folks were looking for.
As far as clarification on that.
Can we wait until the presentation's done?
No, but
well,
go
I'm
ahead.
going to ask you to.
EMS transition costs analysis, and the EMS startup costs, as you can see, we were budgeted $1,375,253, and we have spent $1,368,880. We have a few small things left to finish up there, and next quarter when we come, that budget will be closed out. EMS billing data. So in FY25, of this year, the first quarter, we have billed $905,690. $875,000 of it is transports, and $30,360 is for mileage. Quarter one for last year, which Golden Cross billed $338,648, and they received $308,559. We then broke it down into 5 different percentages of what we could collect for collection rate. And Golden Cross collection rate was 86%. So if we were to do that, we would be, for the first quarter, would be $778,893. We picked 54% as a mid-range. It would be $489,073. We then took the 38% collection rate that AP Triton predicted in our study, and that would be $344,162. We then figured out what the collection rate would be if we were to collect what Golden Cross did at a 25% rate. We would be at $226,422. And then we took and figured out what the collection rate would need to be to meet the revenue that the reimbursement that we predicted in the budget of when we started this, and we would need to collect a 16% collection rate of $144,910 for the quarter. The chart below, I'm sure, is a little confusing to some folks, but as we begin to gain more billing information and gain more data through it, you're going to be able to see the ups and downs as you can see it. Similarly with Golden Cross's numbers in the red and in the blue. But as we grow and as we begin to get the reimbursements in, that chart will begin to make more sense. Which brings me to, do you want to answer questions before I go into the rest of it?
Yeah, that's probably a good pause. Franz, your clarifying question.
Yes, thank you. So there's a couple of places where it seems like there's something that's just doesn't quite make sense to me, and other places where I just don't understand what you're referring to exactly. If we go to the high acuity responses by call type, the data is given in percentages. So what I'm imagining is that those are percents of the total volume of calls for the time period.
That's true.
So that the high acuity calls for July was 5.7% of all your calls were overdoses. Okay, that's good. I just wasn't sure what was a percentage of what. On the previous chart, there's something that's just some type of an error crept in. In the FY 2024 quarter 1 to quarter 4, it says maximum time to scene was 15 minutes. But if you just keep going over to the right, in quarter 1 of that year, the maximum time to scene was 29 minutes and 18 seconds. So the 15 minutes can't be right. I don't know. Or there was something in there doesn't add up.
So the maximum time of scene you'll see is the 30 minutes and 17 seconds for this previous quarter. What those calls are is when we get toned to what could be a fight in progress, PD's en route, we stage, or there could be a psychiatric emergency at that address. And until the PD, and sometimes it takes them that long for them to actually clear the scene to say it's safe for us to come into the scene. That's what makes that number high. Okay, well that's fine. It's just that the two columns for the whole year of FY24 and then for the first quarter of FY24, those numbers are incompatible with each other.
And maybe that's something that could be looked at outside of this room.
It's not a big deal, but
yeah,
and we can correct that for the next report.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And then also, I don't understand where in the billing data, the figure where you say to match Golden Cross ambulance reimbursement, the $226,422.50. What is the Golden Cross reimbursement that corresponds to that number? I mean, the Golden Cross, I mean, maybe I'm just looking at the wrong things, but the Golden Cross reimbursement was $338,648. So what's the $226,422? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, two things here. One, you got to understand the Golden Cross was what they were charging, and two, what we were charging per call.
Yeah, that's why that's an interesting number.
Yeah.
I just don't understand where that specific number came from.
One of the data points that you're looking at here is this is referencing quarter 1. So when some of these projected revenue rates that we came up with is for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because they're simply projections, we're looking at getting the most accurate reading for that year, and that's where that 25% match came in. So yes, it doesn't directly correlate with the 308,000, but if we were to figure that out through the year, that's where that number came from.
So that's sort of normalized over the entire year, just not the first quarter? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any others? No. Other clarifying questions about this first part of the report? And I'll draw people's attention to the time. Liz.
Thank you. Hello, gentlemen. I have questions about these high acuity calls. Maybe it's not germane and we can meet some other time and you can explain them to me, but like, who do you hand off to? Like, if someone has a mental health episode, do you take them in the ambulance to the hospital? Do they go to HRS? Like, who do you hand off to?
Typically, if we go, we transport them to BMH because they have to be medically cleared before they could go to any other facility for treatment.
Well, see, that was an easy question, wasn't
Yep.
it? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any others? No? The billing data is interesting, and I guess we kind of knew it would be. It's a little confusing at first. I think your explanation of it was helpful. And as of this report, we hadn't actually received any collected funds, or there are no collected funds in actual dollars.
It's in process.
Yes.
And
so that
happy to have Billy go into it, the whole thing, but it's all a matter of getting things lined up through Medicare, Medicaid.
And we made a plan to put aside $250,000 for the first quarter because we knew that there would be lag, and that's fine. I think it'll be we're going to need to just have information about actual collections. It'll be interesting to see how these projections play out. They're just projections.
Right.
We chose a billing rate that was much higher. We also chose a collections policy that was very lenient. And so we'll see how that actually plays out in real time. I wondered if the payer mix information is being made available to you. And, maybe we don't need that every month, right? But certainly once a quarter, kind of just checking in, did that payer mix actually kind of look like what we thought it would look like? Because the payer mix is a big part of how we get the, actual reimbursements.
And as we gain more, as we get our reimbursements back, we'll be able to provide that.
Yeah. And so, I just look forward to seeing that data in future. It's not something I'm worried about today at all. That's all I have. Anyone else on this part of the report? I see you, David. No? Okay. David?
Not quite a clarifying question, but it falls in the context here.
Sure.
I would like to call upon the town to provide, beginning in January, data on billing in the first quarter and collections from the first quarter, billing in the second quarter and collections from that second quarter, all excluding the $250,000 that was put in for lags. And for that to continue quarter after quarter, I suppose, given the fact that I think it's a 180-day period after which you write off, by the time we get to the report in July of 25, the first quarter won't be all that interesting to us. There may still be some money coming in, but minor. But I think we absolutely need to have not just what we've billed thus far and what we've collected thus far, but it needs to be done on a quarterly basis because at some point, some of that money's not coming in.
Yep, I think that's very clear, and that was kind of my expectation that we would see, real collections data, and it would have information on it as to how old so it's day one you bill, right, and then day whatever, you guys get a check.
It's not how it works.
Okay, fine. Let's not overcomplicate it at this time of night. But I think what you're asking for is real collections data, right, with information on how long it takes to kind of come in. Is that what you're asking? We don't need to get too in the weeds?
No, that's fine. But for a given quarter, I want to know what was billed in that quarter and what was collected relative to what was billed.
Yes,
I don't want to see what was from.
That 250,000 is
connected.
A little placeholder.
Right.
Yeah,
but it needs to be connected. Bills.
Yes,
collected.
That's what I want
Thank
to.
you.
Thank you, Dick.
Well, you danced around it, Mr. Chairman, but
I did. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, and I thought it was very pointed. My whole thought through this whole process is money, and I was asking when we were going through this, when we would get the Golden Cross report, how much money we were taking in. They said, well, just because we bill it today, we don't get money today. But we're over 90 days out. And there should have been something here about some monies that we have taken in. Now, because when we billed, this is the first quarter, but it doesn't tell me how much we billed in July or how much we billed in
I think it does
August.
actually in the chart. It's just kind of small.
Well, it's in Braille, so I haven't.
But it
taken my Braille.
does.
And so, but that would be, I would be thinking that we would have it may be a little amount, but at least it would say, this is monies that we're getting in from our billing in July. Yep. And so I agree with, in January, we should say, okay, this is what we have billed, and this is what we have taken in, this is what's outstanding.
Agreed.
I think this is
that's
way
what
too
I want to
much-
see too.
Well, I think it's way too much of a lag.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I thought I would actually see some dollar amount here. It doesn't, I'm not saying it would be an astronomical number, but I thought I would see at least some dollars to say, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But there was nothing here.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
And
Thank
so
you. Great
I'm going to
minds
trust
think
these
alike.
professionals to go back to Golden Cross billing, right? Because that's who's actually doing the billing for us, and check in on our collections. And, and by the time we see you again, we'll have some information to report.
As I said a few minutes ago, there's reasons why you're not seeing anything yet. There's a lot of bills that are getting sent out. They most likely could have got sent out today or tomorrow because we're waiting on Medicare, Medicaid. We got our federal number, now we're getting our state number. All these things take time, and we have 364 days to send out a bill.
Okay.
So you're going to see revenue starting to come in. That's why you don't see any revenue on the chart right now.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief Howard. All right. So, folks, I'd like us to move on to the next part of this presentation, which is about overtime. Chief Howard's prepared a memo on pages 86 and 87 and 88 and 80. Oh.
Yep.
Those pages. Just those 3 pages.
Yes. So I wanted to address this before the financial report because we're at our overtime budgeted just shy of what our overtime budgeted amount is, and it's for many reasons. Because of contractual reasons and because of safety reasons for the staff at the station and safety reasons for the people that we serve. That we require 8 people on duty all the time, and 2 of those positions have to be officers, which they're the ones that are in charge of the shift. One of them has to be a paramedic, one of them has to be an advanced EMT, and the other 4 have to be firefighter EMTs. And we have to take into consideration, we have a member that's in the National Guard, so he has to go away. People are sick. People go on vacation. And currently in our contract now, we have wellness days, which means every 10 days they're getting a day off. And so with that, we have to make sure that we have the minimum number of people on staff, which is 8. So during the month of July, there was a need to fill 44 overtime shifts, which is 1,056 hours of overtime. 50% of this need was to fill a firefighter spot. 27 was to make sure we had 2 officers on. 11% was for an ALS position, and 11% was for a paramedic position. As an administrative staff, we often work on calls to decrease the overtime expenses. For instance, during the recent fire we had at Tito's, no overtime callback was required because we were able to utilize our administrative staff, being EMS Superintendent Fritz and our office manager, who was also medically certified, was able to fill in and cover the ambulance during that time. Those are just many examples of how we save. And people are going to say, well, why don't you just use those 2 people instead of paying somebody overtime? You can't do that. You're taking away from their job, and their job is important, just as important as the responder's job is. So we try to utilize them when we can, but we have to realize they have a job to do, and that's their main reason to be there. So also know if staffing reflects a broader trend affecting emergency services nationwide, and we included some links to reasons why. This is not a Brattleboro issue. This is a nationwide issue. This is an issue with our neighbors that are career staff. I talk to fire chiefs all the time, and they're going through the same thing. Back in the day, there was more people coming to take the test than there was actual jobs, and now it's just the opposite. There's more jobs than there are people to fill them. So with that, you'll see that we've hired some people and they've moved on, and it's just the way the job market is right now. You can go somewhere and you can look around and say, well, this place is offering way more money, way more better benefits, and they're gone. It's not like it was 5 to 10 years ago, and it's obviously been recognized. It's been recognized by Senator Sanders and many other people, and it's a big issue in emergency services across the country, and it's going to continue to be until the tide changes. When that is, I don't know. So this is why our overtime is what it is. We have recognized that our onboarding, the way we onboard people, that we need to improve that better. Currently, we would bring them in and do a week or 2 of orientation with them and then put them on a shift. When they go on that shift, they still don't count towards that shift count because they're still in training. And sometimes with the call volume, the way it is some days, they're not getting the new people aren't getting the proper training that they should be. So now we're identifying that once we bring on a new hire, moving forward, we're going to keep that person at a 40-hour position 5 days a week and get them onboarded. And then once they are onboarded and ready to go on shift, as soon as they go on the shift, they're counting towards shift count, which helps reduce the overtime. The other thing that's going to help reduce overtime is we got staff in advanced EMT classes. We got 1 person in a paramedic class. These folks are finishing that up, and it's going to help more because we're obviously going to have more of those positions to help. That's not going to require us to have, if somebody's off, that's an advanced EMT, for us to have to fill that position with an overtime spot. So there's a lot of moving parts to how we fill shift and what makes shift operate safely and effectively for the town. And I can assure you that it's worked on every day, and we're doing the best we can with what we have. And I can assure you all that we'll continue to do that. I have a very good staff, and we're working on it together. I'll leave it at that, and if you folks have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Chief. Select Board members, questions? Liz?
Thank you, Chief. 2 things. First, would it be fair to characterize this overtime as kind of a front-loading element, and that once it's been recognized and you're working on it, but it's really part and parcel of the new service and getting up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly getting the new services added to it, but as you can see, the majority of the overtime isn't because of the new service we're offering. It's because of the positions that we have open.
Now, the positions that you have open, they are unfulfilled line items in your budget. So I would imagine that they offset, that money offsets the overtime.
There's a slight
Is that
offset,
correct?
yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Brent?
So we've got people in training now, but we had people in training before and they're gone.
Mhm.
Do you think that steps you're taking are going to convince our current trainees to stay? I mean, I'm basically what I'm asking is, what do we need to do differently, given that there's a tremendously competitive market for people who do this kind of work? What do we need to do to recruit enough people so that we don't have this problem on a continuing basis? Is there anything you can think of?
Not currently, and not amongst my colleagues around the country. We're all scratching our heads and
So
trying to figure this out.
people don't want to be firefighters and EMTs right now. It's puzzling to me. Seems like a pretty good job.
Yeah. The way the market is right now, Franz, I've been talking with Billy and Chuck and John, and right now I can see us having an open spot, that it being a normal thing, continuously until we figure it out. Fortunately, we have 2 spots right now. I got one that's filled, and the gentleman will start later in the year. We had a couple screening interviews today with a couple solid candidates that we're going to move on in our process. I feel lucky that I got 2 people to interview. Some departments don't have anybody to interview, and Hartford, Vermont just hired 2 people with zero of anything, and they're going to just train them themselves. And the other disadvantage that we have, and I've talked to legislatures about, is we're not as fortunate as the police, because they can send them. They can hire somebody off the street and send them to the academy for 16 weeks, come back and do some FTO with them, and go. We don't have that luxury here. We have to either typically try to find somebody with one or either of the trainings, and then our state fire academy doesn't offer continuous firefighter 1 or firefighter 2 courses throughout the year. They only offer 5 a year, scattered around the state of Vermont.
And is that's a funding question primarily?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I think you spoke to, shifting your onboarding kind of strategy. And I think that is an attempt at having better retention numbers, right? Obviously, It won't be perfect depending on the candidates, but, onboarding is tough. It takes a lot of time. And if you don't onboard people in the right way, it's hard to either have them, A, do a good job, or B, keep them. And my colleague here next to me is thinking about savings from the staffing line, and that's fair. That is a fact. And we also, I know, are thinking about burnout, right? And
100%. I got people working. Typically, they're supposed to work at 24/48, and they're working at 48.
Yeah.
On 48, off 24.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that a shift in onboarding kind of strategy will help us retain folks. And we'll see, right? And we'll trust our professionals. Other board members with questions, 10:03 p.m. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate all of your work.
Yes.
And all of your team's work.
All right.
We'll
Thank
see you again in a few months. Our final item of business tonight is the quarterly finance report, and Kim Frost has been waiting patiently for many hours. Kim, nice to see you. We've got a quarterly financial report here for Q1 of FY25.
Yes.
Kim's written us a nice memo, which everyone has read. And maybe you want to give a brief presentation about it. We'll ask you some questions, and then we'll go home.
Okay.
How about that?
Sure. So, like you said, I did write a memo, so I'll go right to kind of the flags that we saw within this report. Chief Howard just spoke about the one issue about fire overtime, which you hear how they're gonna work towards dealing with that. We also had the same issue in the police department with overtime. And they had the same thing where they were down staff, they needed more coverage. Then they had 5 cadets training that are now off training that are being counted as part of the lineup. So hopefully that is going to take care of that expense. Every fund is running within the parameters for the quarter. So yeah, if you have any questions from the budgets, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Kim. Questions? Franz?
Hi, Franz.
So last time we met, there was some discussion of fund balance and unassigned fund balance and our supposed 10% reserves. Now, you were hesitant to give any firm numbers on that because things hadn't been audited, et cetera. As I thought about it afterwards, I would really appreciate knowing more about kind of what it looks like, what's on the horizon for us in terms of fund balance and, is there any more that you can say at this point that would clue us in as to the effect of, for example, the spending on the police officers, et cetera, what that's actually doing in the FY25 budget, not looking ahead to FY26 yet, but how much damage have we done to our fund balance in terms of some approximation that you have available at this point?
Well, that's kind of hard to say, right? Because you've okayed an unbudgeted expense for a certain amount of dollars, and it's going to depend on, are we going to spend the full 675, and are we going to hit budget? So if we don't go over, so say you spend 300 of that 675, and that does not make us go over budget, you will not impact fund balance. So that's we kind of can't answer that piece of the impact of what that decision will be on fiscal 25 budget until the budget year is over. Because we're kind of, we just started.
So let me ask, so are you saying that there are other areas in the budget that will compensate for that, or that we don't have to spend this money that we allocated, or we may not end up spending it for some variety of reasons?
I'm saying I don't know. We have a full 9 months of a year ahead of us. I don't have a crystal ball.
No, I know you're saying you don't know, but I'm asking, what is it that you're saying you don't know? Are you saying that there could be other budget items that make up for this? Or are you saying there's just uncertainty as to whether we'll spend this money to the extent that we allocated it? Or maybe you're saying both.
I'm saying you asked me what the impact of spending that money is going to be on the FY25 budget. And I'm saying we don't know what the budget is going to look like at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, and I also get what Franz is asking. I think, you're giving an answer of a responsible financial professional, and we're asking a question as, responsible lay people who work with budget documents but are not, I'll speak for myself, are not professionals in this matter, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I hear from Franz's question is, we reserve a certain amount of unassigned fund balance, equivalent to 10% of our general fund budget, right?
Yep.
That's a true statement. And we have, elected to spend an unbudgeted amount, which we were kind of proposing that if it had to, it'll come out of unassigned fund balance. And I hear what you're saying is, well, we actually don't know how the budget's going to land, right? We don't. We're only a quarter in. There may be savings in that budget that mean that we don't actually need to spend from the unassigned fund balance in the way that we think that we might. Is that a true statement? Or is it way more complicated than that?
I think the impact, the question was, what is the impact on the FY25 budget of spending that money, and we don't know that.
Maybe what the real question is what's the impact to our fund balance if the budget goes exactly as we've budgeted for?
Right. Then it would impact our fund balance. And when we find out what our fund balance is when we get audited, which our audit starts next week.
Yeah.
So we'll have a much more clear idea. But if you're asking me, do we have enough money in our fund balance to cover $675,000, then yes, we do have enough money to cover that.
And then
do
if
I have
everything-
exact numbers? No.
Yes.
So if everything went as planned, that's the amount that we'd be in the hole at the end of the year, since we don't budget for having excess fund balance.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Other questions? Mr. DeGray.
Given what we just heard from the fire department, I would hope that you would go back to a monthly review of the financials. That was a huge shock to see that budget, that overtime line item is that huge. And one of the questions I wish I would have gotten to ask the chief, when he talked about that first training class, everybody left. I was going to ask how many people were there in that training class, because if everybody left, I would hope that they did exit interviews and you would find out, was there other motives why they left and not just to go to other jobs.
Right.
If
So
these
maybe
guys are
that's
going someplace, then somebody's not having a problem.
Maybe you could follow up with Chief Howard about that.
But I do believe that when we're having issues like this, or you should say you should get a report on the fire and police department monthly rather than wait for, you're not going to get another report now till when, January? Mm-hmm. And I think it's too far out of control when it gets to be where it is. I don't think you're on top of the finances when we're going once every quarter. Okay. I really do. And I thought it should have been mentioned in the red flags down here, that the overtime. I know you talked about it in the narrative, but it is a red flag. That's a huge red flag, the overtime in those two. Because you're looking at over $1 million in overtime in the fire department.
And the reason why this agenda had Chief Howard speak to the overtime extensively before the financial report is because we knew that it needed a conversation. And I will say, and it's in the memo, that our professional staff who actually do this work every day of the week monitor the budgets, at least monthly.
We're actually monitoring the budgets weekly at department head meetings. And I do just want to say that the fire department as a whole is within their staffing line budget.
Yes.
They are at 26% of budget. We're at 25% of budget. So they're a little bit over, but they are tracking okay. So that's why I didn't put it as a red flag. So while they might have been over one line item, their staffing in general was within budget. And I felt that calling it out and making sure we were aware of it, but knowing that the staffing line was within budget was not a red flag.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Yep. And then the other thing that Dick's asking about is, we used to have this report monthly. Mm-hmm. It was recommended that we go to a quarterly report. We said, okay, we'll give that a try. If I hear from a majority of the board that they want it monthly, then that's what we'll ask for. Okay, hearing nothing. I was a fan of the monthly report, but I also want to, really recognize that the monthly report doesn't just happen, right? There's actually staff time that goes into it. And so do we want our staff to be, preparing a monthly report that the select board doesn't seem to have many questions about, that's a question for us to consider. And I see your hand. Yeah. And so I'm hearing nothing from the board. All right. So
Well, I'll say that I think it's a reasonable thing for us to think about. I'm not ready to take a position on
Fine.
making that change right now.
very good. Kate.
Brattleboro was where I lived. I would actually really urge you to think about the monthly report. And I know I beat this to death every time I get up. The finances of this town are, in my world that I see, are an extremely perilous position based on the budget stuff you guys are talking about. These funds that you're taking money out of, you've got to be really, really careful, and please be on top of it. I do believe it's the select board's responsibility to know what's going on with the funding, and we pay our staff for a reason. And I think they need to provide the data so that you know what's going on and the public knows what's going on. I'm not saying they don't do great jobs. Everybody does a great job, but this is the most important thing that you folks should be worrying about right now is our town budget. Thank you.
Thanks. And we're just about to enter into a whole budget process. I actually wanted to say thank you for providing a more detailed financial report from OpenGov. This is much more in line with what we used to see. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay. Looking for a motion. Seems like we're kind of done with the financial report. Elizabeth.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, Liz has made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That passes 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you so much to our interpreters. I'm sorry that we kept you late. I'm sorry that we didn't check in about it. I'm sorry that we had a break like 40 minutes later than we planned. Thank you to our staff. Thank you to members of the public that participated in this meeting. Thank you to BCTV and their robots. We'll see you in a couple of weeks or something like that. We'll see you at the next regularly scheduled select board meeting.